Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. And today I have one of my favorite guests, and I think one of the audience's favorite guests as well. Be prepared to hear a mile a minute. I'm going to introduce the great Grant Cameron. Grant is the recipient of the Leeds Conference International Researcher of the Year and the UFO Congress Researcher of the Year. He became involved in ufology as the Vietnam War ended in May 1975 with personal sightings of a UFO. These sightings led to a decade of research into the early work done by the Canadian government into the flying saucer phenomena. From here, Grant proceeded to do almost 3 decades of research into the role of the President of the United States in the UFO mystery. So with that, Grant, welcome back. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Sean. I appreciate your interest.
I'm always interested in talking to you, Grant.
Yeah.
So it's been a while since we last talked. So what's happened since then? Probably let's say like the last 90 days. There's a lot of activity, but I'm not sure exactly where it's leading.
Well, I actually got to a point, this would be a couple months ago, where I actually was sort of like tired of it all. I sort of thought I'd gotten what I needed out of UFOs and out of consciousness research. Because to me, it was always a game. It was always a chess game that I wanted to figure this thing out. And then it's sort of like, same, I had the thing with the stock market. For decades, I couldn't work the stock market. Suddenly it worked. And it was like, it's not interesting anymore. It was like, well, once you figure it out, and that's what happened. So I was kind of in a doldrum there because I don't have a TV. I don't, this has been my life for 50 years is UFOs and this sort of stuff. So I had to actually get myself going. And I've got a couple of projects I'm working on now. And I'm not sure where we left off, but I've got 2 books coming out, well, 3 books coming out now. 2 of them they were going to be called the Super Bowl, but they're called the Big Game. And it basically looks at all paranormal phenomena. So what I maintain is that,
and you can't call it the Super Bowl because the NFL will come after
you.
It
gets sued. So it's called the Big Game. So we changed the name of the book. And
by the way, do you know what the Big Game is? That has significance as well. There's something else called the Big Game.
Well,
so
go ahead.
That's my alma mater's. Stanford plays Berkeley every year in something they call the Big Game, and the winner gets to keep the axe. So anyway, I just thought this, random synchronicity, sort of.
Yeah. And Stanford's in the book. We have all the bizarre stuff that was going on at Stanford that people really don't realize, that the Leland Stanford, who started the whole thing, his son died at 15 years old, and they were getting into seances. And then the brother, Thomas, was over in Australia, and the kid came to him after he died at a seance. And he has there's only 2 report collections. Things that fall out of the sky that the experiencers will report, physical mediums will report, all sorts of different things. That's the whole thing of the book, is that this stuff happens all across the spectrum. It's not just UFO stuff. If you find it in UFOs, you're going to find it in psychic phenomena, in channelers, and all sorts of stuff. So there's an report collection at Stanford University, and there's one at the University of Manitoba here where I am. And I wrote a book called Weird. Paranormal apportations and manifestations. So Stanford actually has the collection.
Where at Stanford is that collection? I need the.
It's in it's in the archives, in the special collections, and it has the famous turtle. So people always one of the things now I sort of bring up with that Jim Semivan, the high level CIA guy, talks about. People are talking, we got bodies and we got crafts, and this is ET, and Semivan says no. Because you've got bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know what you're dealing with. And this is, so I always bring up the thing is Stanford, Thomas Stanford had a turtle that appeared in one seance, plopped into this seance one time, and the turtle was alive, and he put it in the garden, and it lived in his garden for his life. And when the turtle died, the shell is at Stanford University. So it was one of these apported things. So I say, so it was this turtle an extraterrestrial turtle? No, it's not. It's coming out of the field. Everything's in the field. And that would be sort of my bottom line to this whole thing. Is I think people are going to be very disappointed when they find out what's really going on here. It's not really going to be ET. It's not really going to be nuts and bolts. the poor Christians are going to find out that the Buddhists and the Hindus were right. It's all Maya. It's all an illusion. It's this whole idea that it's all just vibration. There's no colors. There's nothing physical. It's fields when you get down to the subatomic particles and stuff like that. And so that was where I was at, where I sort of figured it out, and I was kind of confident with what I had, and I just sort of lost interest in it. But I picked up a few new things. This book is coming out, so I guess we'll be promoting this book. I really don't promote my books. I've got a lot of books, but I just put the books in order to work it out. Like if you've ever done lectures or if you've done books, what you learn is that's when you learn stuff. You have to put things in order, and then, oh, what was that guy said that quote? What was that quote? And then you go looking for the quote, and then you put it in, and you get it all lined up in order. And that's basically what it is. So I've done that, and I've just actually got a book that I started yesterday, which I'm actually halfway through now. And this is going to be a very controversial book. Let me see what we called it. Silence. Hang on, I got the title here. The case against UFO disclosure. And I think I can argue anybody about UFO disclosure. People want to say we need disclosure, and I say no, you don't need disclosure. This is all nonsense. So I make the case, and it's a book, and it's and one day I've got it maybe half finished. Maybe a couple of weeks I'll have this all, because basically it's just as fast as I can type. I know the ideas, I know all the arguments and stuff like this, and I spell out the arguments. And it basically comes down to going back to Dr. Eric Walker, who I wrote about in UFOs Area 51 and Government Informant. He's the highest level official that anybody has ever had. He had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, president of the Penn State University, chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, head of the Defense Science Board, got a presidential citation, was on the board at the Institute for Defense Analysis, a top military think tank, when they developed DARPA. He was on the trustee when they developed DARPA, when they developed the Jasons. That's all this guy. And we had these conversations with him, not me. I was sort of like the ringleader. And people would say, oh, I get Walker to talk. Kid Green went after him. Hal Puthoff went after him. I'm sure Eric Davis probably went after him. Stanton Friedman went after him. And it became that this guy knew what was going on. In fact, he wrote in one of his letters with Vannevar Bush. He was very good friends with Vannevar Bush and with Vannevar Bush's sister. He taught with Vannevar Bush's sister at Tufts University. And he said in Vannevar Bush letter, he said that he and Vannevar Bush had helped develop national security policy for the United States. He was there when it all started. And the whole thing starts when somebody discovers that this guy had been at a set of briefings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And a guy out of California phoned him up and said, I heard you were at this Wright-Patterson Air Force Base briefings in 1950, dealing with the recovery of a flying saucer and extraterrestrial bodies. And Walker said, I was there, so what? And this started about a 7-year conversation. And we, in UFOs Area 51 and Government Informants, I put down what we did. All we did was take all the transcripts of all the interviews that people had done with him and put them down. And for 30 years, I couldn't figure out what the heck he was talking about, because he was talking in rhymes and riddles. Now I sort of go, and I confront people now, and for a while I've done that, is this whole idea that Walker defends the fact that they're keeping it secret. And he said he was there, he knew all the MJ-12 people, and he basically said, why should we change the rules and the regulations to satisfy your curiosity? And what I say is going on here in Congress, that's all this is. It's curiosity. Why should they release the most highly classified secret? Because some guy's interested in what's going on with UFOs. And they basically say they really don't care. In fact, that's the story that I think it's gotten sort of twisted around. Vannevar Bush, or not Vannevar Bush, George Bush. There's a story told that George Bush told Jimmy Carter, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. He said, if you want the files, those files, you have to go to the House Science and Technology Committee. Now, then we really didn't know what this is all about, but now we would know that the House Science and Technology Committee is not going to have the Roswell files. As Semivan points out, the people in Congress are only briefed at a secret level. The people on armed services and intelligence are briefed at a top secret level, but they don't have all the clearances in terms of SCI clearances. Some of them may have atomic clearances, but this is basically what it was, that the files.
So you're saying that most members of Congress only have secret SCI clearances? They
That,
don't have
that's
top secret SCI?
that's what Semivan says. Only people on armed
Wow.
services and armed services and intelligence, and even those people I still don't have a need to know. So you may not know all the programs is based on a need to know. So Semivan points out that basically he said it's that the classification is going to be top secret SCITK, Tahoe-Kean, like the satellite stuff that is involved with this. And he says basically they don't. And then we get this idea where they're saying, well, Congress and Semivan is probably the best person I'd say you got to listen to. This guy claimed he got 2 to 3 briefings. I knew this early on from Chris Bledsoe and from people that he had gotten a briefing. He actually talks in one of his interviews about a briefing that he got, that he was told to get a room at the CIA, a conference room for 6 to 8 hours. And these guys came in, and he said these guys were scientists and contractors. And he said they had as many clearances as he had. And Semivan had basically all the clearances. He said they had as many clearances as I had. And they had do not escort. They could walk around the CIA any way they wanted. And he said these guys walked him into this room, and for 6 to 8 hours, they scared the living daylights out of him. And they told him what was going on. And this is this whole thing. So Semivan is one of the guys I think that you've got to listen to. He's had the experience. And I even wrote an article, or I did a podcast, which I guess a lot of people didn't hear, but I basically did a podcast that Semivan had the most important UFO sighting that's ever been had by anybody. And the reason it's so important was because Semivan had the beings in his room, and he always says, they violated my sovereignty. They didn't ask permission. They injured me. They injured my wife, and they didn't tell me why. And I want to know why. And I'm 30 years there. I'm still angry. And so I answer the question. I say, you know why? Why? Because he's the guy. When in 2016, when I was talking to Chris Bledsoe called him the big man. He said the big man has said a number of high-level officials are going to come forward, and they are going to say UFOs exist, and they are going to force disclosure. That was Jim Semivan. Jim Semivan went, as he says in one interview, he went to the director of national intelligence under Obama, and he said, you guys can't get this out. We're going to get this out. We're not going to violate security, but you guys had your chance. We're going to get it out. And they said, Godspeed, keep us informed. And he's the guy behind the disclosure. And the question is, would Jim Semivan ever have gone and forced disclosure and went to all the 3-letter agencies and told everybody, we're going to disclose this thing? And he's the guy I say was behind the New York Times article if he had not had the sighting. They came and they rang his bell, and that's what his sighting was all about. It was the most important sighting ever to occur in ufology, as far as I'm concerned, because it's the one that started this disclosure movement.
One of the things I found interesting, I think, about the interview that you're talking about is there was also knowledge of the specific beings that he encountered, which he wouldn't talk about. But he said that they were effectively somewhat rare, but they had been encountered before.
Yeah, and that these guys in the briefing had told him, "Oh, you're dealing with so and so." Apparently, Len Stringfield had talked about them at one time, and they are like the Michelin. They're called the Michelin Men. They were like the armor.
That's the Pescaloosa.
I don't know. That's what I understood. They looked like the Michelin Men.
Or Pascagoula. Pascagoula. Yeah.
Yeah. But now I'm starting to change again. I'm starting to see everything in a different light than other people are. The other guy that I think everybody has to listen to is James Lukatsky. You got to listen to these interviews 10 times, and you got to say, why is he saying this? Why is he saying that? He confirmed my whole story. I put out the book, UFO Sky Pilots, which said that 36 people had told me that they flew the craft with their mind. And then Lukatsky goes on to an interview and he says, you know, the UFO technology is a combination of psychic and physical material. And that's exactly what I said. It's got this consciousness thing. And then when he said the other thing that I found very important was Lukatsky says, you know, we had 200,000 sightings in the OSAP database. And he said it was like driving down a street and every car was different. And he basically says all UFO sightings are different. And as soon as he said that, I went, oh my God, I went racing back to the book and I looked at the 36 people, and there's a motif. So there's like a dream motif. You have a dream, but all dreams are different. There's a flying saucer motif of people flying the flying saucer. So yes, there's a motif. The people are on board the craft. They're told, where do you want to go? And then the person tells them where they want to go. And then they say, it is within you. Go within yourself. When you can imagine it, then we will go there. And they touch something on the craft and they're instantly on the other side of the galaxy. And the thing is, I went back, and when he said all crafts were different, I went back and I looked, and sure enough, no two people touched the same thing. Chris Bledsoe touched a beehive in the middle of the on a pedestal in the middle of the craft. This U.S. Air Force retired colonel put his hands on a panel on the side of the craft. The guy from England put his hand on a panel on the wall. Some people pushed a button. Some people did a joystick. Nobody did the same thing. And so you start to say, hey, are all the is this a dream? Is this like they're leading us through? Why are they all different? And then I started getting into the thing with that people all sort of assume, oh, we got this technology, and if the Congress gives us money, give us $1 billion, we all walk out with suitcases, we're going to build a flying saucer. And then you start looking at the Area 51. So let me ask you a question. You know the Bob Lazar story, Area 51, 115. Have you ever heard anybody else tell the story that they were in a craft with 115? No. And Bob Lazar says there was 9 different crafts in the hangars, and they're all different. And then you start to wonder, are all the propulsion systems different? I started to look. Yet I've not found 2 propulsion systems different. You get people who've never been in the craft, like, Sarfati and all these people talking about wormholes and, warp drives and all this kind of stuff. That's all theoretical stuff. But when you start looking, you start wondering, are all the crafts different? Are all the beings different? I was going to do a lecture on a cruise ship, and then I got sick, so I didn't go on the cruise ship. But I was going to do the lecture, and I've done this before. So people say, oh, we've seen the grays. And you go, and you just assume, oh, they're all seeing the same grays. So then I take a PowerPoint presentation. I put Whitley Strieber's gray, and then I put Betty Andreasen's gray, and I say, do they look the same? Not even close. And then I put, different. I was about 20 different ones. Boom, 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 boom. And you start looking, and all of them are different. So it's like there's a motif, and then you wonder, like, are all the aliens different? And I've got a catalog from early 1900s through to 1966, before the Greys came. No 2 aliens are the same. Everyone looks different, and then you start to wonder what's really going on here. Is there actually?
And they're always just one step ahead of us in the technology curve, right? With the airships in 1897.
That's the whole thing. Like, people will say it's ET, and I say, seriously, you believe it's ET? So you believe that in 1896, people from Mars jumped onto these wooden ships with propellers and balloons, and they flew through the vacuum of time and through the vacuum of space. And they go, no, that was because of their age, the age that they're in. And that's what they're doing. They're reflective of the age that we're in. And that's like dreams, the same thing. So if you have a bad day and you have a PTSD moment, and then you have a dream, you're going to have a bad dream. It's this reflection thing that we're taking this stuff on. Or even go back to 1896, and you start rereading the reports, and the lights start coming on. The 1896 report, when it hit the windmill in Texas, when it crashed, it was moving between 10 and 12 miles an hour. That was big time speed in 1896. And you go, like, come on, the thing that exploded, hitting a windmill at 10 miles an hour. This is total nonsense. Or you have the thing with Roswell. They say, oh, they had this metal and you couldn't cut it and you couldn't bend it with a sledgehammer and stuff. And yet it hits the ground, and it's like dropping a wine glass off the Empire State Building and hitting the ground into these little pieces. Why are there always little pieces? Or you take a look at the pieces. No 2 pieces are the same. I will maintain none of the pieces that have been recovered are the same. And I went to hell put up. I said, hell, come on. They're dropping this stuff. It's airports. They're just getting you to think they're dropping this stuff. Or the implants. They're all different. They're all different things. And you start to wonder what's really going on here. And it's much more complex than people think, but it's much more mind events. We think there's an out there. And that's when Jim Semivan says, he says, there does not appear to be any out there. And I say to people, this is a guy that got like 2 or 3 briefings, high-level briefings. What the hell's he talking about? What does he mean? There does not appear to be any out there. People think that there's these aliens, they're coming through and they accidentally got here and stuff like this. And the more you look at it, it's almost like anything else in the universe. When you look at something, the deeper you look into anything, whether it's just even say an amoeba. An amoeba has 12 quadrillion atoms in it. It has 670 billion base pairs. And is able to reproduce the base pairs without any mistakes. And you go, holy shit. And it just gets more complex and more complex. And that's the same thing's happening with UFOs. The more you look at it, it doesn't get any simpler. It just gets more complex and more complex and more complex as you go along.
Yeah, the one thing that seems to be a very common theme is the phenomena is reflexive, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
When you talk about people to your point, and you talk about folks who went to Skinwalker Ranch, right? They went with weapons and they were looking for a threat. Well, that's exactly what they got. Yeah. But I don't think everybody has a negative experience there, right? It's very reflective.
Yeah, even Travis Taylor. If you hear the story of Travis Taylor, and people get mad when I laugh at it, but he came on and he said, "Oh, you people are all crazy." I mean, this is, well, come on, it's not, the Earth's not talking and stuff like this. And they zapped him twice with the you know the what was it, the radioactivity, and suddenly he's on his Jesus. He's come to Jesus instantly, and now he's as crazy as the rest of them. And that's what you see. Or the guy that did the Tom Winterton, who they go on, and that's the way we are. We're human beings. So the phenomena, or the rumor was, do not dig on the property. So what's the first thing they do? Let's get a bobcat. Let's dig. And Winterton said there's been no exception. Every time I've dug, something has happened to either me or the equipment, without exception. And you go like, holy cow. And that's what we've got to realize, is this idea that we are part of the phenomena we're looking at. And people want to sort of, put it as, there's these evil guys out there and they're doing stuff to us, and we got to realize we are part of the phenomena that we are engaging. And when you start to understand that, then you understand the importance of this consciousness thing, that it may all be consciousness. There's no physical anything. It's just this like, even I had an experience. This happened, goes back at about a month. I had this experience. My friend ended up dying of a stroke. He was in the hospital for 10 months. My best friend, who was actually driving the car when we had the sighting in 1975. And I went to him just before he died. It was a couple of weeks before he died. And I was really dizzy. And I knew his experiences started when he was dizzy. So I said, Larry, I got to go down. I'm going to go down the other end of the hospital. I'm going to the intensive care, or the unit there. And I was in there for about 11 hours. They did all these tests and stuff. And they came up and said, no, nothing. But the dizziness didn't go away. And then it was sort of going away. I'm walking down a path. I have these two sort of visions, and I'm walking down this path along an rapid transit expressway, and there's a walking path there. And I'm walking, and all of a sudden, it was like everything started to vibrate. Everything, the whole scene, and I was going to throw up. It is the most disturbing thing. If you want to drive someone nuts, I would say that what I saw, and it was out of sync. It was almost like there was a second image that was out of sync, and I was ready to throw up, and I was dizzy, and it was like, what's going on here? And everything was like, it was going to collapse. Everything was going to collapse. The whole vision, and that's the whole thing. That this idea that if that were to happen to you, you commit suicide in about 5 minutes. You wouldn't be able to take this, and people don't realize everything is vibrating. I had a channeler who was talking about energy, and I watched channelers very, very closely. And I have a thing that can tell me exactly whether it's a real trance channeler or whether it's not. There's these certain tests that I give them. So this one I watched, she's not very well known. Her name is Margie. So she's talking about energy. I'm reading this thing. She's talking about energy, which she usually doesn't talk about. And the guides say, they're talking about the atom. And they say, well, the magnificence of the atom. And then to realize that the space is vibrating. And I went, what? The space is vibrating in the atom? And you get this idea that space is nothing, and that the electron is vibrating in this empty space. And so I go, wow. So I go to, and for years, I've gone after the highest level sources I could. And I can't really name this guy right now. It'll eventually be named, but I go to the highest level source I can. And I say, hey, this guy is doing a movie. I say, hey, ask him, does space vibrate? And it comes back unbelievable. He said, yes, space vibrates. That's how we send information from one universe to the next. And I went, holy cow. So you start to see this stuff, like it just gets more complex and more complex and more complex.
Wait,
and the idea that I thought,
when he said how that's how they send information from one universe to the next,
that's how information is.
Say more.
That's all it was. I was happy with that. I mean, we'll ask him more questions, but it was basically this idea that that space is vibrating, and you don't realize that. But so we got to realize is that what you're seeing is not what you're seeing. We are moving 1,000 miles an hour into the east. We're spinning, but we don't. We say, no, we're stable. Everything's stable. And we say there's colors. There's no colors. We say we're seeing it inside our head. There is nothing in your head. Your head is dark and it's silent. The mind is not inside the head. It appears like it's inside the head, and things are vibrating. Everything appears like it's stable. You look at everything and it looks like it's stable. But if they slow the vibration down, you'll suddenly see that everything's vibrating. And so we make these assumptions about this. We make the assumption about, and basically I've come to the conclusion, everything that we perceive with our five senses is going to be wrong. everything. And that's what we got to realize, that that's what the phenomenon is trying to do. It's trying if paranormal phenomenon is to create awe and curiosity. If there is no awe and curiosity, there's no scientific investigation. What they're trying to get you is to say, why is this happening? What's the weird thing? Or as Gary Nolan says, I'm not interested in the 95% that falls within the bell curve. I'm interested in the 5% outside the bell curve. That's where the Nobel Prizes are. If you try to figure out why is this happening, it shouldn't be happening, that's when you discover new stuff. So that's sort of where I've gone, and I've done some writing on this. And then I sort of figured, it made sense to me, and I wasn't really interested. But then it was sort of like, that's all I've done for 50 years. I mean, I don't have TV, I don't talk to people or anything like that. And then I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? It's like my life is over here. And then I figured, I better get a project here. So it's kind of really depressing there for a while. I was, trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? And then so I picked up these new projects. And the other one that I guess I can mention, because you're big into remote viewing. I just got across one, and I've actually got the 2 interviews. One was with a woman by the name of Ty Dickens, and the other is Diana Hennessy Powell. Now, I've watched Diana Hennessy Powell. I've written about in Inspired. I wrote a book called Inspired, the Paranormal World of Creativity. And I say one of the most important things you can study is savants. Because if you get some guy like George Finn out of New York City, and they ask him, George, what's 2 times 3? And he goes, would that be 5? And they ask him, what's 5 times 7? Would that be 50? And then they say, hey, George, what's the next 12 years that the Easter will fall on April the 1st? And then within 1 minute, he will give you the answer. He's not figuring this out. He's not calculating. He's pulling this out of a field. And this is this idea that all the information is in a field. So Ty Dickens, and I said at one time, Gaia wanted me to do a TV series. And I said, they said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, savants, of course. I mean, savants, this is the most amazing thing in the world. Like, where are these people getting this stuff? It tells you that the world is not the way you think it is. And they said, well, we don't have a travel budget. So the whole thing fell apart. But Diana Hennessy Powell has done along the lines of what I've done, is this whole right brain, left brain thing. That in order to get in the field, you got to shut down the left brain. You shut off the left brain. The right brain, the female brain, is in contact. It's the oneness. It's in the contact with the field. You get in the field, and all the answers are in the field. And it's the ability to get in the field through hypnosis, trauma. It's 70. We wrote a book called Contact Modality. 70 different ways to get in the field. You get in the field. So Diana Hennessy Powell is an expert on savants. And she had this very famous nonverbal autistic, and that's the whole deal. Nonverbal autistics, the verbal center in the brain is in the left brain. So if somebody's a nonverbal autistic, that means their left brain is highly damaged, and that means it's shut off. And so she takes Haley, this girl, and Haley hit 162 numbers right in the telepathic test. And she has this video of Haley doing this sort of stuff. And now she's got new ones. So she's got one in Georgia, she's got one in New Jersey, whatever. And this Ty Dickens came across this research, and she started to document this. And it's called the telepathy tapes. It'll just blow you away. You say remote viewing is fantastic, 78%. These kids are all 100% accurate, 100%. They give them all these tests, words, made up words, numbers, mathematical formulas, and these kids are 100% right. And so you start to see, like, we're starting to figure this thing out. And I think this is one of the most important things I've ever seen, this research that shows that if this can be validated, of course, nobody's going to want to touch it. Because it shatters your worldview, that we don't want to go there. Same as autistics. A lot of scientists will say, yeah, autistics can do these magnificent things, but we're not really not interested. They don't want to go there because it's, how are you going to explain that with the materialistic model of the universe? So these kids, you get this thing where these kids can do this repeatedly, and then you're in a situation like, okay, now how does the world actually work when you see this? And this is this whole idea that there's this field and people are getting stuff out of the field. Or even if you get in this new book, I talk about this idea of people, 60% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe or everything about themselves. And I say, if you're a researcher worth his salt, why would you take that off the table? Why would you not at least talk to this person? 31% of all near-death experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. Even Nick Cook, who now runs Bigelow's Consciousness Project, his wife had a shared near-death experience. He tells the story. I don't know if you've heard it. He says, my wife's there. Her mother is dying. She's holding her mother's hand. And then her mother dies, and she gets up and she says, everything's perfect, and goes walking out of the room. And Nick Cook goes, what are you talking about? He goes running after her. What are you saying? Your mother just died. How can everything be perfect? She said, weren't you there? He said, well, no, where wasn't I where? Weren't you in that field with me? And he said, no. She said, well, I was in this field and I was told the answer to everything in the universe, but I was told I could not take it back. And they told me everything is perfect. Everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. So I do a whole chapter on all these people who had this. One was a near-death experience, face first into the concrete, 50 miles an hour from a motorcycle. One was a float tank, a stockbroker out of LA who's in float tanks, and people start talking to him in the float tank. That's what he was told. Everything's perfect. Everything's exactly the way it's supposed to be. And I go through this whole thing of this idea that we can access the field, that we start to understand how to get in this field, that everything is in the field. There is only here and now. There is no past, future. There is only here and now. And this whole idea that all your lives are happening at the same time. You've heard these theories. Your lives are happening at the same time. And this is one of the disclosure things. Jim Semivan points this out. He points out that half of the people in the United States are reading at a grade 6 level, that 2/3 of the people in the United States cannot find Miami, Florida on a map. And I point out that if you take a look at people, if you go and Google search attention span of a 2-year-old, you'll find it's between 4 and 6 minutes. If you Google search the attention span of someone on the internet, it's 8 seconds. So you have all these battles with people on Facebook and Twitter. These people are the 8-second people. They haven't read a book. They know everything about the answer to everything. And this is the whole idea, is that the material is there. You can access this material. And why would you not go there? And if you're talking, Jim Semivan says, if you're the president of the United States, if you know what's going on, that's fine. Then you can put out what you have. But if you're the president of the United States and you have bodies and crafts and films, but you have no clue what's going on, why would you put that in front of people who are reading at a grade 6 level, can't find Miami on a map? 64% of people are Christian in the United States, and you're going to come to them and say, no, the Christian thing isn't really right. It's actually a Buddhist thing. It's the Maya concept. It's all vibration. It's all illusion and stuff like that. And why would you do that? What's your fallback position? If suddenly everybody starts to freak out, what do you do? Right? Where are you going to go? It just leads to a million questions. And until you know, you're not going to step forward and put that in front of the public. It doesn't get you anywhere to do that. And that's one of the reasons why the disclosure thing is so dangerous and why the government doesn't do it, because they really don't know. And Semivan will say that. I just posted on Twitter. He said, I will bet 1 year of my retirement salary that they have no clue what's going on. They do not understand this. Yes, they got bodies. Yes, they got crafts. Yes, they got films. Yes, they may know some intentions. They may get some messages, whatever. But in terms of controlling it, they have no control. This phenomenon, as he says, it can walk in your bedroom. It can put voices in your head. It can make you see things. You're going to tell people that are basically paying their bills who have no attention that this is going on, that these people can come in. And then he says, basically what you do is you make the statement. So the president says, we don't know what's going on, but we're working on this thing. And then as he says, you're going to get some, crazy podcast guy with millions of listeners who's going to say, it's all demons. They're here to rape the men and women, and they're pedophiles going after the children, and they're eating the dogs and cats. Your move, Mr. President. What are you going to do now? And because it's going to take hold. And how do you stop that? We know how this stuff can take hold, these conspiracy things, and you've got worse situations. So you just sit in the background and you basically don't say anything. You work on it secretly in the background and hope to hell you can figure this thing out.
So, I mean, the cat is already out of the bag, though. I don't think you can walk it back. So what would the strategy be from the government standpoint to sort of do it? I guess it would just be to
but it's still
modified limited hangout, right?
Yeah, but it's still, guys, I mean, it's like I was looking up Snowden tonight. Snowden was only a GS-13. One of the reasons that he basically defected with all these documents is because he wanted to be an executive. And they wouldn't make him an executive, so he got mad. And what you've got is like these GS-12s, GS-13 guys running around, and they say, well, I've worked on the crafts. And as Pandolfi points out, they can say whatever they want. I mean, you can play it, you're a spy. How would you know? So if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I was working on the crafts and it's not classified. Like, do I have a big S on my forehead? Do I look that stupid? I mean, I always say to people when they do that, it's like, why are you not in jail? I mean, this has got to be classified material. Why are you running around talking about this kind of stuff? And that's what we have, is these guys who are claiming that they're this classified material, but nobody can really prove it. And you have these guys who get the briefings, like he said. I mean, say Rubio says, okay, I want a briefing. So they call Rubio in and say, okay, here's the deal. sign this piece of paper. We're going to brief you on this kind of stuff. And they brief him and they say, we got bodies, we got crafts. We don't know what's going on. That's the end of the story. Now you're not allowed to talk about it. Goodbye. And he said, that's it. That's the whole story. Yeah, that's the whole story. We're trying to figure this thing out. And you get situations where people say, oh, they're not briefing. Congress is making this whining thing. Oh, they're not briefing. And I say, you got to review the history. Lakatsky, listen carefully to what Lakatsky said. He said in 2011, I was in a congressional facility, was not in McDonald's, was not in the White House. He was in a congressional facility with a senator. And the discussion was that they had craft and they had been inside the craft and the craft didn't have an engine. And then Lakatsky said, so question is, what are we really dealing with here? And the thing is, so that was Senator Reid. People have confirmed that was Senator Reid that was there. So the Gang of Eight are briefed on this. This is nonsense that the Gang of Eight, they say, oh, it's all illegal. They're not briefing. And then you get to Semivan points out, what do you mean? If the Congress controls it, then yeah, they've got oversight. But if it's an executive branch program, and I looked this up, you can look it up. If it's an executive branch program, he said it's a PED. I've never heard anybody except for me talk about the fact that this is a PED. Now, Semivan calls it a presidential executive action document. But if you look it up, it's actually presidential emergency action document. And there's been about 20 of them that are written. None have ever been declassified. None will ever be declassified. And basically, it's like continuity of government. The president in the early years says, we're going to start this program. It's going to be exempt from anybody. We're going to make a bigot list, has only these people on it, and it's exempt from Congress. You don't have to brief Congress on this because the president has this much power that he can do these presidential emergency action documents. So people say, no, I have the right. I have the right to know. And one of the big keys would be the whole thing is, if there's a nuclear attack, where do they move the president? Where do they move who's in the government waiting? How do you protect the government? You're not going to make that stuff public. And you say, well, I pay taxes. I get to know where they're going to hide the stuff. And they go, no. This is an emergency action document, and that's what John, and you start to put the dots together. So John Alexander, at one point, I did a whole section in one of my books, I think it was in UFO Area 51 and Government Formats. I did a whole thing on MJ12. People said, that's not real. I said, come on, there's like 20 stories, and one of them is John Alexander saying, yes, MJ12 is real. He talked to somebody in the know, and the guy said, and he said, but it's not UFOs. It's got to do with continuity of government. And I went, continuity of government is the same thing. It's this PED thing. It's this super secret presidential thing. So the executive branch is running it. So Semivan says, if it's executive branch, you can be Congress all you want. You have no oversight on that. And if you go back to what DeLong said the crafts are not owned by the government or by the contractors. They had a deal where they had these bankers who put up the money. So you start to look, and they have these back doors and how this stuff works. And we just make the assumption, Congress has got oversight over money and they can do this sort of stuff. And Semivan is saying absolutely not. And you can actually look it up. And you will see there's certain things that the president does not have to brief Congress on. He has power to do this, and it's this idea that he has this executive authority in emergency situations to make a decision and set up a program. So if you have you have this sort of thing, or Semivan points out the thing about the sole contract, that people don't realize this thing, that if you're say you recover a craft, what are you going to do? Are you going to put in a technical magazine? Oh, we at the CIA just recovered a flying saucer, and we'd like all everybody to bid on the contract to back engineer the flying saucer. No, the way he said, I've done it not on UFO stuff, I've done it on all sorts of contracts. It's a sole contract that you bring in a company on its own, and the agreement is that you will never, ever release the fact that you worked with the CIA. And this is the whole deal. So he said you cannot out these companies that have done the back engineering because you have these sole source contracts with these people. And this is the way it's like giving up the identity of all the spies in Russia. They're never going to do it because it's indefinite. It's not 25 years, 50 years. It's indefinite. You can never release. And then Semivan says this is going to be a major thing where there's going to be these lawsuits about who controls this ability. Can you out these contractors? When you've made agreements with them in writing that you will never identify who they are or the work that they did.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for them, though, they kind of issued these contracts without any competition,
But
right?
that's how it
So,
works. Semivan says, I've
yeah,
written hundreds of these things. That's how it works. If you're going to make, what's the option? Are you going to put an ad in the paper and say, I need people to back engineer a flying saucer, and this is where the flying saucer is, and we want you to come look at it, and people are going to bid? That's not how it works. If for example, he mentions this thing about Elizondo hints at that as well. It would apply not only to UFOs, it's like NVIDIA. So say it was discovered that the CIA stole technical material from Taiwan on chips and gave it to NVIDIA. And they are now a $3.25 trillion company. If it became known that this material had been given to them, stolen from the CIA, are you going to out them? Are you going to say, oh yeah, we give them this material?
no,
What is NVIDIA going to be worth? Is it going to be worth 3.25 trillion tomorrow? No, the stocks is just going to go through the floor. And this is the problem that you've got, that there's a lot of these contracts. All the contracts in the intelligence are done this way, sole source contracts, because you've got to protect who's giving you the information, who's working on the project, and everything is contracted out. Because if you're a guy in the CIA, you don't have back engineer a flying saucer, you don't know anything about engineering, you don't know about anything, and everything is contracted. Half the U.S. government is contracted out, and it's this sole source contract thing in the intelligence world that is going to stop this thing, where it's in the rules. You cannot out these companies. And the other thing
so
is that the companies have invested money. And Bigelow talks about this. Bigelow says, I'm in favor of confirmation, but not disclosure. He says it's proprietary. So the $22 million that he got is well known that Bigelow put a lot of his own money in. So Bigelow says, to hell with you and the horse you rode in on. There's no way I'm going to give it to you. So what everybody says, oh, we want the material. So what's Sean going to do if he gets the material? If they out it, what are you going to do? Now sell it to somebody? Are you going to get a patent on it? They're not going to give it up, because they know there's billions of dollars, trillions of dollars to be made on this, and they're not going to put out. Same as Lakatsky said, it's proprietary information. The companies have put in billions of whatever amount of money, and they are
yeah,
not
billions.
going to stop research and hand it over to the white world so they can make money off it. That there's no way. They control the material, and it's like, go get your own flying saucer. We've got this. We've got a contract. We put our own money in this, and there's no way we're going to give it back for nothing.
Yeah, I think the eminent domain thing is an obvious poison pill, right? That's just meant to prevent disclosure from happening.
Well, it's
But
not, but it's the way the world works. It's
right,
eminent disclosure that if you got a company that built the A1 tank and they built it with all their money, you can't just give away the patent to people who say, oh, I paid taxes, I want the patent, and I want to make money on it
right.
too. You put it in the white world, because that's what Walker said. Why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? Admit it. You're just curious. And then he said another point. He said, so let me ask you a question. When you figure it out, what are you going to do with it? And the question, I have asked lots of people, and they have no clue what they're going to do with it. We'll do a podcast. We'll do a special podcast. We'll, this sort of stuff. Nobody has any. They're just interested in what's going on. They're just curious as to what's going on. They have no expertise, no intention, whatever. They just want to know. And they say, and that's what Bush said to Jimmy Carter. He said, curiosity is not sufficient need to know. Just because you're interested, you want to know, doesn't mean that we're going to give up our secrets. Like I would say, like, I'm a Canadian. So what I'd like to know is, I'd like to know how many Canadians are spying on me and other Canadians and reporting to U.S. intelligence. I want to know that. Let's put that on the table, because the UFO thing, the Canadians said in 1950, the UFO phenomena is the most highly classified secret in the United States. So if you open up and put that on the table, then everything's on the table. What can you not disclose? Everything's lower than the UFO thing. So are they going to disclose everything, where all the spies are, how, what they stole from other countries and stuff like that? No, they're not going to, because that's not how the world works.
Yeah, I don't think they should be sharing the craft design and things like that. But where they do have no business is like a monopoly on the nature of reality, right? Like
But you can do it.
not
You can do it yourself. That's why I'm
yeah,
saying, one of
yeah,
the
you have
chapters I
to.
have is the true
Right.
nature of disclosure. The true nature of disclosure is not, I call it the boys and their toys. That's what this thing is. It's the boys and their toys. On this cruise ship, they had 11 women speakers. They had 12 men speakers. They had a whole pile of disclosure panels. There was not a woman on any of them. There was no discussion of experiencers. When you get into this world, and then Jim and Sheehan said that when they were dealing with the contractors, the contractors said to Sheehan, please don't bring up the abductees. That's what they don't want. They want you to stay in the boys and their toys. We're going to have engines. We're going to have, free technology. We're going to have, more accurate and more powerful AR-15 rifles. And we're looking at all this stuff, all the technology, and it's the boys and their toys. But the bottom line is there may not be any technology. This is when I had this whole thing where Lukatsky says it was no engine. And Betty Andreasen said the same thing. They were moving her around in this orb, and she said, I'm looking in the orb, and there's nothing. There's just this bench, and there's nothing. And then I went to Chris Bledsoe. I said, Chris, you talked about when you were being moved around, when you got abducted that day, you were gone for 4 hours. He said it was like 4 months, Grant. I was gone for 4 months, and they were moving me around in this thing, and it was glass, but you couldn't see it. You could touch it. It was solid, but it was around him. And he said, Grant, I've never seen an engine ever. And this is the whole deal. What are we actually looking at here? Is there an engine, or is this consciousness thing? And the bottom line is that the real disclosure is the consciousness thing. It's the idea that the world is not the way you think it is. It is not nuts and bolts. It's Maya. It's consciousness. It's being created. It's vibration and stuff. And that's what's going on. They come in out of a higher vibration, come into our vibration. They can make things appear physically. They're etheric beings. We're etheric beings. That's the story they don't want. And in the UFO community, it's the same thing. If you take a look at all the major documentaries that are being in the UFO community, they will not go to disclosure. They are to experiencers. They will not deal with it. One of the main guys said, I can't go there. I'm going to stick to the scientific nuts and bolts stuff, and you will see that it's totally ignored. And I make the joke that when I start talking about consciousness, I got to look over my shoulder because somebody's going to be sneaking up on me with a cross and nails. They hate this stuff in the UFO community. They do not talk consciousness. Do not bring this subject up. We just bring up the nuts and bolts, the technology and stuff like that. That is a red herring. In fact, the beings at one point said, do not go down the technology route. It's a trap. And that's where we're in. We think that there's going to be this technology. There's not going to be the technology you think it is. All the crafts may be different. All the propulsion systems may be different. And it's all this consciousness thing. And that's the true disclosure of what's going on, is that this is a consciousness thing. This is how the reality actually works, that things are vibrating and there is no color, and everything is all space and stuff like that. And we're perceiving this world and we think it's solid, and we think there's colors, and we think everything's solid. And it's like, no, none of this stuff is right. And the Eastern people figured it out 5,000 years ago. And then the quantum physics people started to figure it out, and they went to the Hindu people and they realized that there was this connection between what the Easterns were saying 5,000 years ago and what's going on now. And this is this idea that the bottom line, the real true disclosure, is going to be the consciousness story. And they do not want to go there. They want to stick you in this thing and get you to the idea that there's this Illuminati. They would love nothing better than you to believe there's an Illuminati, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in a dark alley in France looking for the Illuminati because you're on the wrong track. It's like, go look all you want, because that's not what's happening. And Semivan points this out, that the people in the government, one of the points I bring out in this book about justifying the cover-up is there's been 14 administrations. People have this idea, oh, there's this Illuminati, there's these people behind the scenes and they're running the thing. There's been 14 administrations that have dealt with the UFO phenomena, and there's been no defections. Everybody in there has done exactly the same thing. And there's an expression there, but for the grace of God go I. If you were in that situation, you would do the same damn thing. They're all, because when I went to the presidential libraries, there was no UFO documents. So I used to read like Dick Cheney's papers and interviews and stuff. And I go, hey, this guy doesn't seem so bad. When you start reading their background stuff and why they made the decisions they did, and you go, oh, this guy may have been deceived and crazy. I mean, he had a wrong idea, but he actually believed what he was saying. And that's the whole thing. There's no defections at the high level of the president. They're all doing the same thing. They're just pushing it down the road because they really don't know. And we have this idea, oh, they got it all figured out, and we're flying crafts all over the solar system. And it's like, no, we're not flying nothing. As Jim Semivan says, he was asked by John Alexander said, I don't believe the government's got program. And Semivan said, yeah, they do have a program. And then John says, so who's running it? And he said, they are. And he's confirmed this number to me. They're running the show. They're behind the disclosure thing. They're running this whole thing. And we got this idea that we can take this thing on. We can shoot them. It's like the idea of the guys at Skinwalker Ranch. It's like, bring these special forces guys, and they're not afraid of anything. And we're gonna play hunt the Skinwalker, and we're gonna take this thing on. And the phenomena goes, play Skinwalker? Oh, we'd love to play like the Skinwalker. And these guys are running for their lives. And this is the whole thing, is we don't realize how much this phenomena is in control of what's going on here. And even the crafts. I mean, you got the crafts that are on the ground. And Chris confirmed this to me again. I talked to him again about it. 30 feet on the outside, you go inside, it's the size of a football stadium. And anybody that says we got the technology, you got another thing coming. There's absolutely no way. Or the first woman to fly the craft told me they got crafts that are as big as a solar system. But on the outside, it may look the size of a baseball. When you go inside, it's the size of a solar system. And that kind of stuff, you just realize that this phenomenon is so far gone. And we're on this little route of boys and their toys, and we're going to get some technology, and we got a piece of flying saucer. And I said, every piece of flying saucer is different. There's none. I've got 3 of them. And one actually from the gifting field. And this is the whole deal. We think, oh, we'll get this piece of metal and we're gonna build it. We haven't gotten anywhere with the metal. We haven't gotten anywhere with psychics. We haven't explained psychic phenomena. We haven't explained telepathy. We haven't explained flying saucers. We haven't explained anti-gravity. We haven't explained anything. We're just making up these stories that we're gonna figure this thing out. It's all beyond us. Every paranormal phenomena. We have not discovered anything about any paranormal phenomena. We cannot reproduce it. Because people say, oh, we got this thing. And one of the downloads I got was the difference. They gave me these 24 things. And one was, are you describing or are you explaining? And basically what people are doing in science is they are describing. So they say, okay, Moses went to the Red Sea, he had his staff, he hit the Red Sea with the water, and the wind came up and the water opened up and it all was dry, and the children of Israel went through, and then the Egyptians came in behind and the water came back together, and you go, yeah, fantastic, wonderful story. Now let's see you do the trick. So it's one thing to describe what's happening in paranormal phenomena or UFOs. That's what we're doing. We're just describing UFO sightings. It's another thing to do it. Can you actually reproduce it? Can you? And when it comes to paranormal phenomena, I would say every paranormal phenomena, we have no control. We have no understanding of how it's done because we're missing the whole boat. It's consciousness. It's not some trick that's being done in the physical world. And these people know how the game is played. They realize how consciousness works, that we're creating the universe. God did not create the heaven and the earth. God created the sparks of the divine, and we are the ones creating the heaven and the earth through consciousness. Everything, as Seth, the first channeler, said, you manifest everything around you. There is no other rule. That kind of stuff. You go to the people on the street and tell them that you're manifesting everything around you, they're going to lock you up. The people are just not ready for this. We are in this little 1% bracket that we think, we've got this control of this thing. And majority of people are like my kid. He's paying $5,800 for a mortgage. He's had a UFO sighting. He's talked to my dead father. He couldn't care less. It's like, Dad, just leave me alone on this stuff. I'm busy. I got my stuff my bills to pay. Most people are in that world that you drop this, as Semi-Van says, you drop this giant meatball in front of people. Come on, you just can't do this. It's just so complex and so out of the norm of what people believe in terms of saying, all this is wrong, that's wrong. You don't believe this is, and people will just flip out. And all you need is one guy that's going to say it's demons and they're eating the dogs and cats and stuff like that, and it takes off. And then what are you going to do? One question, if you say, you confirm, yeah, crafts exist, but we're not going to tell you anything more. You think that's going to stop anybody? Come on, it's the next question. And it's 1 million questions, then 10 million questions. It just keeps going. You just keep going. And you can't stand the president, who's supposed to be the most powerful guy in the world, who's in charge of the security for the president, everybody in the United States, and stand him up and say, yeah, UFOs are here, but I have no clue what to do. I have no control over this whatsoever. He looks like some total loser. You want him to be the presidential guy, so you basically make a statement like Obama said, yeah, we saw the videos, but we really don't know how they fly. Well, yeah, the videos is for real. These crafts are there, and that's where they're standing now. And I think they're gonna hold their ground on there, because all you're doing is giving up more ground. Or you take the people that say the caucus. So the caucus, the House caucus. If you look at these people, they're pretty radical. I mean, some of these people are anti-NATO, anti-Ukraine, and so you're going to bring these guys into a skiff and give them the most highly classified secrets in the United States. How long do you think it'll be before there's a report on Putin's desk as to what was said in that skiff? And that's what Jim Semi-Van says. What you tell your friends, you tell your enemies. That's the other problem they have, is that you put it on the table. Nobody's asking China to disclose. Nobody's asking Russia to disclose. It's just the Americans. And it's a game of bluff, that everybody's holding their cards and everybody's trying to get the other country to put their cards down. And we're helping Putin put the cards down in the United States of America. We're going to force the cards guards down, but nobody, I would be okay if you said, okay, we want the Russians to do it and the Chinese, let's put pressure on them as well. But they're not. It's this one-sided thing. And the Americans say there's no way we can go there. That's not going to gain us anything by putting our cards on the table. And you just may get Putin. And everybody knows if you get this technology, I mean, you rule the world. I mean, it's like the atomic bomb in World War II. We dropped the atomic bomb, and then what's Japan going to do? They go to the emperor and say, oh, man, they dropped an atomic bomb on us. And he said, well, build an atomic bomb, we'll drop it on them. How long is it going to take? Oh, 7 years, 8 years? You can't. It's called lead time in weapons. If you're even one day ahead of the other guy and you have the technology, you rule the world because the guy can't fight back. You can use your secret weapon. And we're just creating a very bad situation for the U.S. Military in terms of the fact that it's this standoff thing that put the technology. But in the end, I don't think they have the technology. They, as Semivan says, and he said, I will bet a years of my salary, my pension salary, that they really don't know what's going on. They just don't. He said, I don't care what anybody says. It's beyond, it's way beyond us. Like he says, people say, all you gotta do is put together the dots. And he said, you show me the damn dots. I don't think there's even any dots. And you hear a guy that's been briefed talking like that, or you get Trump is briefed, and so is Pence. I posted these things. Pence said he was briefed. He said, yeah, I was briefed. They don't exist. I was at Area 51. I didn't see anything that didn't look like us. He said, no, I don't even believe it. And then Trump said the same thing. Yeah, it was very interesting. I talked to these pilots and they shot some videos and stuff like that. And he asked me, well, what do you think? And I said, no, I don't think I really believe. So he got the briefing. He still doesn't believe in UFOs. And this is the whole deal, is that you got people who are in a mindset like skeptics. There's this idea now, like skeptics are not skeptics. Skeptics are just people with very set worldviews. If
they're true believers, right,
in what they have. And so you can go to Shermer or you can go to the people, you know exactly what the guy's going to say. And that's the whole deal, is that they're saying I'm a skeptic. No, you have a very set worldview. And a lot of people in the world have very set worldviews. Even the split of the United States, you can have people, two people hear the same speech, half the people hear the same speech, and half will say this, and somebody will say they were in a different speech. And so you see this division that goes, and you don't want to throw the UFO thing in there where you're fighting. How do you do it? If somebody comes and says they're all demons, that you confirm that this is for real, and someone says it's demons, how do you walk your way? Like Semivan says, be sure you've got a fallback position. If you're going to drop this thing, be sure you got a fallback position, because it can all go south pretty fast. And then how do you fight it? How do you fight the rumors and the conspiracy theories that are going on? It's almost impossible. It just starts to pick up, and podcasters pick it up because it gets clicks, and it takes off. And you don't need that. We got enough problems trying to solve the UFO thing without fighting all the people who are now asking these questions, and Congress are demanding reports and stuff like that. We've got enough problems now. We don't need these extra problems of millions of questions that we have to answer, that we don't have the answer to.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're going to last that long. I think I don't know if we make it to the end of this year, to be honest. So,
well, as I said, and that was the thing. That you read my next book; it's got the chapter. Everything's perfect. Everything's exactly the way it's supposed to be. Because people will complain, "Oh, I'm in this. This is terrible. It's a horrible world." And I say, if reincarnation is a fact, Sean, then you and I chose to come here at this time, at this place, in the middle of whatever mess we're complaining about. And it's maybe spicy. We came for a reason, because we came to try to help the mess. It's like the idea of the volunteers, the 3 waves. It's like, the world's going to hell. Everybody, hey, put me in. I'll volunteer. I'll go solve this. And that's the whole idea. You can't interfere with somebody else's society, but through reincarnation, you could put people into the system. And that's what we are. We're people inside the system who are trying to raise the consciousness inside the system.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue for me is this lack of truth, and I think that's why I'm here. It's just
but are they everything? But are they lying? For example, people have this whole thing about Kirkpatrick saying there's no evidence that it's extraterrestrial. He's absolutely right.
He's telling the truth. Yeah.
He's telling the truth. When you get a government,
he's just framing it in a way that makes him sound.
That's, but you got to watch. Right. When you got government statements, you have to watch how it's being parsed. Exactly that's why I say with Lakatsky, nobody's listening. Everybody's just listening to the story and they go on to the next interview. When I hear Lakatsky and then he says there's no engine. And then they said, well, what's inside the craft? And he said, if you knew what was inside the craft, you'd realize the rest of the book was absolutely primitive. When he says stuff like that, you go, whoa, you start to listen, and you got to listen very carefully to what people are saying. Oh, Obama, all the people are saying the same thing. We don't know what it is. And then people say, oh, he's lying. No, he's not lying. They don't know what it is. They don't believe it's extraterrestrial. They believe it's more complex than extraterrestrial.
Mhm.
And that's the whole deal. So people they want to play the victim game. We're being oppressed and we're not being told, and these guys are lying. I don't think they're lying. I think they're doing the best they can with what they have. If you get into the waived unacknowledged special access program, you have to lie. That's the rule, which nobody points out. That is the
Right.
rule. If you get confronted about a program,
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
it doesn't. Yeah, you have to lie, and that's part of what. And they say, well, you can't lie. Yes, you can. That's the rule. The rule is you have to lie. And that's what happened to Reid. So Reid was in this congressional facility when they were talking about the flying saucer that had been inside, which means he was briefed, and that's why he wrote the letter in 2009 to get the OSAP program into the Black Ops, because he knew the program was in the Black Ops and he wanted to move OSAP in there so they could get funding and the information that was inside the Black Ops. And that's when they shut the OSAP program down. Said, who's this guy? Who's this program? What, they think they're going to knock on the door? They're going to come and get our money and our technology? Shut it down. And that's what they did. They stole the money from the OSAP program and it shut down the year after. So Reid knew. And if Reid had gotten that, if the OSAP program had been accepted into the Black Ops program, Lou Elizondo wouldn't have existed. None of this, the New York Times wouldn't have done the story. None of this would have happened if they had let him. It would have been just like any other Black Ops program that went. And it was, luckily they kept them out, and it stayed top secret, but not controlled, where they could leak this thing out. And that's what Semivan did. Semivan said, because he had the experience, he said to them, we're going to drop this thing. You guys had the chance. We're going to drop it. And they said, Godspeed, keep us informed. And then he went to the New York Times. He's the guy that set up the meeting with Lou Elizondo. Lou Elizondo resigned in the morning. In the afternoon was hell put off. Mellon and Semivan, and he's sitting with his back to the wall, and this whole thing. And then the New York Times did the story. This is all planned, but it wouldn't have happened if they'd have gotten into the Black Ops program. And Reid knew that. So that's why in the New York Times, you remember the story when the New York Times said that Reid had confirmed that they had crashed material. Reid made them do a retraction. Why would he make them do a retraction? Because he got caught leaking it. He's supposed to deny the thing, and he let it leak that there was material, and suddenly it was being published, and he had to say, that's a lie. I never said that. I never said that. Because he's in trouble because he's violated his security oath.
So who are these beings then? I mean, you alluded to the fact that,
well, I always, what I encourage people, and they can contact me, whitehouseuFO@gmail. What I do is I go to experiencers and I say, hey, you ever ask him if he's an alien? And I can give you some examples. So Sherry Wilde is the most prominent one. Sherry Wilde wrote the book, The Forgotten Promise, which is the idea that she had made a promise to come into the world to raise consciousness and be with these beings. And this was all agreed to and stuff like that. And she was very upset about the whole thing. And she does the book. She finally does the book. And her daughter tries to get a court injunction to stop her from publishing the book. And she tries to commit suicide. And she's distressed with this whole, she can't stand what's going on. So she puts the book in, and the publisher looks at it and says, you say Daw's a Zeta? He said, yeah, he's a Zeta. Well, he said he's from Andromeda. Yeah, that's what he said. He's from Andromeda. And then the publisher said, well, he can't be from Andromeda. If he's a Zeta, he's got to be from Zeta Reticuli. And she said, really? Is that right? She didn't know. She goes, oh. So he says, next time he comes, ask him. So Daw comes, and she says to him, so you said you're from Andromeda. Like, are you really an alien? And he said, quote, no, that would not best describe who I actually am. I am an etheric being on a mission in the cosmos for the creator. We're all etheric beings. We're coming on stage. You're playing Sean. I'm playing Grant. When we leave, you're going to say, oh, that was an interesting play. It was like a dream. And your next lifetime, you're not even going to remember the dream. You're going to go to the next lifetime. And that's what it is. We're on stage playing a play, and they're pretending to be aliens. We're pretending to be humans. We're playing this role. We've agreed to have these roles. So Nancy Tremaine, who was the first abductee 2 months before Betty and Barney Hill, her and her girlfriend were taken on board the ship. I asked her, I said, ask Mister, are you an alien? And he replied, we are not alien to anywhere or this planet. We've always been here. And then I asked the beings in Great Britain, there's these two beings that were there, and they wanted me to interview them. So I said, sure, I'll interview them. So the woman's channeling them, and she's talking. And so, of course, the question is, so, are you extraterrestrials? And their experience was perfect. They said, Would you like us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that if you want. We could even take you to our planet. But no, we're not extraterrestrial. We've always been here. You're the visitor. And the key to that is the whole idea. There is no time. There is no space. When you're doing remote viewing, you ain't going anywhere. You're going within yourself. As the Sufi expression that Greer always uses, you see yourself as a puny form when within you is enfolded the entire universe. It's all within you. So when you have an out-of-body experience, when you remote view, you're going within yourself. When the person's remote viewing, they don't say, hang on, I'm flying there. I'll be there in a minute. It's like they're not going anywhere. They're instantly at the target. Instantly, they can tap into whatever the intention is of the target. And the other one that I would mention is there's a guy, Yossi Ronan. If you've never interviewed, you got to interview this guy. He's out of Israel. He lived in LA in the 80s, and he had this experience, and he's written this whole book about one. The key message is one. Everything is one thing. In science, we try to make it into nouns. So the Tao Te Ching, the famous scripture, the small scripture from the East said, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And that's what we do, is the Tao is a verb. And we, as science, we want to turn it into nouns. So we want to name it. So there's atoms, and there's molecules, and there's people, and they're all inanimate, and they're indivisible, and it's all this sort of stuff. So he says the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The Tao is the beginning of heaven and earth. The Tao is the mother of 10,000 things. But the Tao is not a thing. The Tao is a noun. So in science, we want to turn it into nouns, inanimate things, when it's all a verb. It's all one thing. So this is the Yossi Ronan wrote this book called The One. This whole concept that it's all one thing. It's all alive. It's all conscious. It's all connected. And they told him, they said, when we come into your world, we take on a body. We don't have to take on a body, but we do in order to work in your world. You can do the same thing. You just don't know it. Or you take Mike Cleland, the owl guy. He has the experience where he's sleeping in the desert, and this UFO appears, and he wakes up in the middle of the night. He goes, that looks like a UFO on top of the mountain there. And he said, that's pretty weird. And then he falls back asleep again. And he said, next thing you know, he's out of his body, and he's floating above the craft. And he says, I'm above the craft. And then suddenly I'm in the craft. And he said, he said, it's very hard to describe exactly what happened, but it was like there was a gray suit hanging on the wall. And it was like the suit came up, and boom, he was inside the suit. And he went, I'm a gray. And he looked at himself, and he went, oh, I'm a gray. He's looking, and he's a tall guy. And these grays, he said, I'm the same size as these grays. And he said, this is weird. I'm a gray now. And he's walking down there, and he goes into this center court thing. And these beings are there. He can't see their faces, which is the same as Michael Newton thing. When you die and you go in front of the council, you can't see the faces. Mm-hmm. And he's there. And then he says, so what am I doing here? And then the beings say to him, it's time for you to get going. He said, what do you mean time? Time for what? And they said, you volunteered. He said, volunteered? Volunteered for what? And he suddenly, I guess they put the idea in his head, and he went, what? And he starts, F this, F that. He says, yeah, what, you never told me it was going to be so lonely. You never told me it was going to be this tough. And he was yelling and screaming and whatever. And then he said it was almost like he said they put a pin in him, and just he sort of calmed down. And then he asked Yvonne Smith, who was regressing him. He said, Yvonne, when I'm under, ask me, what's my obsession with the owls? Why am I so obsessed with owls? So this is the time. She says, well, this is the time. So Mike, why are you so interested in owls? And he says he starts channeling, and he's got the tape. I've heard the tape. He starts channeling. He says, the owls aren't important. The owls, it's almost this idea. What are they nouns? The owls are not important. The owls don't mean anything. The owls are just a symbol. The owls are a symbol that is on a door. It's the door that's important. When you see the owl on the door, you go, hey, I wonder what's behind the door. And you open the door, and there's this vast unexplored universe. And so what the phenomena is doing is using symbols, it's doing these things, and it's leading us from the UFO is just a symbol on the door. We go and say, well, I saw this UFO. And then you open the door, and it leads to another door and another door, and you keep going. And eventually you sort of get closer and closer to the answer. But it's just them leading us along. These are all just symbols. It's just a play that you're playing your play, and the aliens are playing their play. We're all etheric beings. It's all this idea, you're sparks of the divine, and we're creating the universe. So we've come in and made these agreements and this reincarnation thing and all this kind of stuff. And that's the true disclosure. That's the thing beyond the nuts and bolts, because everybody's into nuts and bolts. We can make some money, and this is all going to be interesting, and where are these aliens from? And basically it looks like they're not from anywhere. Everybody's here and now. You hear this more and more now. People talking about the fact that they're from here. They're not going anywhere. Or you get this idea where Susie Hansen, I just talked to her again about this. I said, can you repeat the story about going through the earth? So she said, yeah. She said, I'm on one side of the earth. And she said, they're saying we're going to take you back through the earth. And she says, what? You're going to take us through the earth? And she talked about it where they dimensionally shift the craft and they go through the earth. And when they get the other side, they reshift back to the dimension they were in, and they move. So that's when you get the things where they're going in the water, and everybody's got the technology. How can they go into the water? How can they not leave a wake? And how can they not disperse water and stuff like that? And this whole idea, because you think it's a physical thing, you think this is physical, you don't realize it's shifting sort of dimensions, and it can go in, and it's not really hitting the water. And this is the whole part that we're missing, is this idea that it's 1,000 times more complex than what we think it is. And they're giving us these hints about this consciousness thing, about the fact, and that was my main download that rocked me for the last 12 years, was this idea. It's all consciousness. I was spinning my wheels. I was doing the same thing everybody's doing right now. What does the president know? Can we get the president to talk? I'm looking for the documents and stuff like that. And it was suddenly like, you're wasting your time, man. And they even told me at one point, quite a few times, they told me, you think you understand what's going on. And I will say this to everybody else that thinks that they know what's going on in Congress. You think you know what's going on. And they said to me, believe me, you haven't got a clue. And that's my bottom line, is that this thing just gets more complex and more complex and more complex. And the rabbit hole gets deeper and deeper and deeper. Like when I started, it was simple extraterrestrials. I saw the thing, it looked like an extraterrestrial. Now you got people doing light language and channeling, and you got the multidimensional theories and crafts hitting water. And it's just gotten so different than what it was. And there was no crop circles. There was no cattle mutilations. There was none of this stuff. It was like they do this, they do that, they do this. And then they stop doing things. Like the people say, oh, we got physical evidence. We got physical evidence. We got ground traces. I said, there has not been a ground trace for 25 years. It has not happened for 25 years. They stopped that. There was 4,000 of them. Yeah. They had one every second day. When I talked to Ted Phillips in 2001, I said, Ted, have these things stopped? And he said, well, yeah. I said, there may be one or two this year, but he said there used to be one every second day. He said, there hasn't been one in 2001 yet. And that's the whole thing. We don't realize that the phenomenon is changing. It starts as wooden ships. Then it goes to Foo Fighters. So we're crying now, oh, they're around the aircraft. Then they're scaring the aircraft. And it's like, yeah, they're just sending signals, man. They're saying, look, we're in charge, buddy. And that's what they're doing during World War II. My father was a pilot for the Canadian Air Force, and his boss had the Foo Fighters on the edge of the plane. It was the same thing. They're flying on the edge of the plane because they're very upset about the military. They don't come and haunt me in my bedroom and they do this kind of stuff. Why are they going after the military? They're sending these signals. They're poking the military. And then we bring up old cases like, oh, they're going after the nuclear missile. And then everybody refers to the 1967 Malmstrom case. And I go, are you serious? That's like 60 years old. You're going back to a case from 60 years old and transposing that to a threat right now. There has not been, as far as I know, Warren Air Force Base 2010 was the last incident with a nuclear thing. They don't do that anymore. They just change from one thing to another. It's the Foo Fighters. But where do the Foo Fighters go? Same as the people in 1896. Not only is it weird that they were here in wooden ships, where did they go? Where did they fly back to Mars? Where did they go? They just changed. They changed to the Foo Fighters. Where did the Foo Fighters? The Foo Fighters only lasted for a year. Then the Foo Fighters went away. Then the Green Fireballs came. Where did the Green Fireballs go? Why did they go back? And it's this thing. They changed from this. They changed to this. They changed to this. It gets more complex. The aliens, then the Greys come in 1961, and I defy people to find Greys before 1961. There was no Greys. The Greys came in, and the whole thing shifted, and then you get the Mission Rama people, and it's reflective. So the Mission Rama people I defy people. Mission Ram is 25,000 of these people around the world. They're having these controlled sightings and stuff like that, and opening portals and stuff like that. And I defy anybody to find a Mission Rama person who had a gray walk out of the portal. There's no way. They're all biblical because they're really religious people. They all look like popped out of the Bible. They got this, robes and long hair and beautiful looking beings. And then the people who are in fear are getting these gray type things. And that's what John Mack at the end of his life actually said. That this idea, he said to John Mack, or to Bud Hopkins, he said, Bud, he's kind of strange. I'm the psychiatrist here. You think I'd be getting all the really bad psychotic people? He says, you seem to be getting all those people, and I'm getting all the seeking ones. And maybe, Bud, that has more to do with you and I than it does with the phenomena. It's the idea that you are transposing this thing, that you're part of the phenomena. and the idea that the people who see grays and the reptilians, like I've had a lot with reptilians, especially the women, and it's this sexual thing, this high energy, and the people have this high energy. These women have this super high energy, and then the reptilians didn't appear until 1980 in the UFO literature, and then you get the mantids. So you have these beings that come and now you don't really have beings. You used to have ships with windows. There are no ships with windows anymore. There used to be angel hair, which back in my day, we knew what angel hair was. There was cases of angel hair all over the place. It doesn't happen anymore. They just change it. Let's move here. Let's do this. And they're just shifting the thing as they're going along and transposing the thing. And we're running along that we got this thing all figured out and stuff like that. And we're way behind the scene. This phenomena, whatever it is, I call it the intelligence, is way, way ahead. And they know exactly what they're going to do. And they basically said to me in the book that I didn't publish, it was going to be called Beyond Managing Magic. And they said landing the plane. I was all upset like you. It's like, oh man, we got to figure this thing out. It's just terrible. It's just lies. It's all this other stuff. And they said, Grant, don't worry about it. Don't worry. We know how to land the plane. And I went, oh, okay. We know how to, like, they're in charge. We know how to land the plane. We know what we're doing here. And they may have done this on 1,000 different planets before. They brought in the wooden ships, then they bring in the Foo Fighters, then they bring in the green fireballs, then they bring in the people from Mars and Venus and stuff like that. And when we figure out that they're not from Mars and Venus, I remember the Canadian guy that was doing the metal research for the Americans were sending metal up into Canada, and this guy was doing the metal research for Wilbur Smith. And I remember him telling me at one point, we were in an interview, and he was a real sort of a scary guy. And he said, Grant, let me absolutely assure you, at no time did Wilbur Smith and I ever believe that Alpha was from Uranus. Like Uranus is like 325 below. And Alpha was saying there's 500 million people or something like that on Uranus, and it's just like Earth and stuff like that. And he said, at no time did we ever believe that. And that's the whole thing. So that fades away, and then suddenly the idea of planets comes, or the star systems come. Then they're from star systems, and then people realize, well, it doesn't really make any sense either. The distance and stuff. Oh, then they're multidimensional. Then they're from other dimensions and stuff. And it just, you see the phenomena keeps these theories keep changing, and we're just chasing something that I say in the end, it's all going to be consciousness. There is only one thing. There is consciousness. It's all alive. It's all one, and it's all connected. And we are etheric beings in this. We're playing this role. We are not, we come on and we take on a stage play. And as I always point to people, because you played King Henry VIII in grade 12 high school, does not mean you are now King Henry VIII. You've got to remember, you are a puppet on a stage. You are playing a role. And when you leave, you're going to have absolute knowledge. Once you leave, you'll go, oh, now I know what's going on. And you come back again through the river of forgetfulness, and so that you can learn your lessons without knowing all this kind of stuff. But from time to time, experiencers will say, and I had in the psychedelic, I had it 3 times, where I had the impression I knew the answer to everything in the universe. It is the most bizarre thing in the world. It's like, I remember people talking about this. And the first time I thought it was so mechanical. I thought, that's so mechanical. And the second time it made sense. It was like these visions where you're walking through fluid. Everything is a fluid. You realize that air is a fluid. And as you're walking through, you're leaving wakes as you're walking through, and your accents and stuff like that. So the more I go, the more I say, absolutely, this is heading towards consciousness. And they know it. Jim Semivan says this. He said, Lou Elizondo pointed. He said to Lou, what's actually going on here? What do you actually think? So Lou says, well, there's a Venn diagram. He said, there's consciousness on one side and there's quantum physics on the other. And the beings, I think, are in between. So he's not saying they're extraterrestrial. They're not physical beings. Lou knows. They all know this thing, that this may not be as physical as you think it is. It can become physical. The same as the turtle. The turtle plops out of the sky, but because the turtle plopped into a seance in the middle of Australia, does not mean it's an extraterrestrial turtle. It's coming out of the field. They can make stuff appear out of the field because and come in. Same as Yossi Ronan's being. When we come into your world, we take on a body. We can take on whatever body we want in order to do our work. We don't need to. You can do the same thing. You just don't know it. It's this idea that they know how the vibration works. They can come in, they can make things appear, disappear. And it's all vibration. There's no colors. There's no space. And this is so I say this whole thing. If there's no time and space, and this is a big discussion in physics right now. If there is no time and space, then how many universes can you fit on the head of a pin? I mean, the whole thing, it all may be just here and now. It's all within yourself. It's this idea there is no out there. You think you're looking out of your eyes, or that you don't even realize that in your eyes, there's blind spots in your eyes, and the mind fills it in. It paints in this because you got the nerve going in through the retina, and there's two blind spots in the eyes, and fills it in. We just assume a bunch of stuff is going on, and when I had this vision of everything starting to vibrate, and it looked like it was going to collapse, it was an inspiration to me. It was a horrible experience, but it sort of got the idea that this is an illusion, man. This is not. It looks like it's solid, but it's not solid, and there are no colors, and things are not solid. They are all space, and there's this vibration going on, and that's where I think they know, but they can't go it because they can't understand this. It's so far beyond them that they can't understand how to make this consciousness thing work. They're working on it. So, as Jim Semivan said, anything that has military potential, they're not going to take it off the table, whether it's remote viewing or anything. They're not going to say, "Oh, I don't believe this." They know you go after this stuff anyway. You do it, and that's what he said with the UFO thing. Basically, they're in a situation where they can't work it, so they put it back on the shelf and take a look at it again. And he said, "You get $50 million," and 5 years later, they come back and say, "What'd you get?" "We didn't figure out anything." And they say, "Well, you don't get $50 million anymore because you didn't figure out anything," and that they lose the budget. And this is what's going on now: is that you're playing the fear game. You're trying to get money. That's why Pendolfi calls it loons, crooks, and worse. The whole thing he said is loons, crooks, and worse. And I start to think that he may be right. And that's this whole idea, is that you go into Congress and you scare the living daylights out of them. Because when Leslie Kean wrote the book, the general book in 2010 with Podesta, she said, "Oh, it's a threat to airline traffic." And everybody sort of laughed at her, like, "Come on." Nobody took it. But then you say, "Oh, there's footprints in in your room, and the door's locked, and they can come into your room, and they can do this to put stuff in your head." And the congressmen are going, wait, and they're getting more and more scared, and you scare them, and they hand over the money. And that's what it is you create a need, and then you fill it. And they tried to do this. I've told this story before. I was with the Canadians when they were talking to the Canadian government. There was 10 MPs from Canada who were going to come public, and they were giving me the whole deal, Elizondo and Mellon, that we needed to get military witnesses, and we need to bring these military witnesses in front of committees and get this thing that this is a threat and all this sort of stuff. And I said it, and the two aides to the MPs that were there said, no, we're doing a scientific investigation. We're not, we've got no witnesses. We're not. That's not how the Canadian government works. There's been an order to do a scientific investigation. And Mellon said, "That's the poison pill. I'm gone." And they pulled out. They wouldn't help us. And these 10 MPs are now still sitting in the closet. They were going to come forward, and they were going to have a panel. We're going to have a panel of experts who are going to answer their questions and stuff like. So they went back into the closet, and that's the whole thing. That's what they're using. They're using this threat narrative in order to raise money, because otherwise, it's like, get out of here. Like, I'm doing intelligence. I'm not interested in this. Who cares that there's things flying around? But if you can say the things are flying around and they're pedophiles and they're doing all this kind of stuff, well, then you get the guy say, "How much money do you want?" And then they walk off with the money, and that's what basically going on. Or as Pendolfi said, they used to go after billionaires, but they ran out of billionaires to fleece, so now they're going after Congress.
Yeah, funny you mentioned Pandolfi. I reached out to him, and the response I got back was the following. You'll appreciate this. "Hi, Sean. You have interviewed loons, crooks, and worse. I am not in that taxonomy."
we got something. I'll give you a little hint. We got something coming down the road. It may take 6 months, 8 months. Something's going to happen. We're going to do our own disclosure. We're going to do something that I think is going to shock some people. But it's not my project. It's not my money. So I'm an advisor to it. But there's some money going in, and Ron's part of it, and we'll see where it goes. I'm kind of optimistic, but that's his basic contention, and that's the whole thing. So his whole story that I was interested. I followed Ron, and almost every book I write has 150 references to Ron. Everything. I watch everything this guy does. His wife does, and of course, the story was that his wife claims that she's an extraterrestrial, that she came through the portal. And she was exchanged at the Reagan White House. She was 5 years old, and they exchanged the princess for the pod. And the pod is the technology for portals. And so I was interested because I knew the consciousness thing already. And I said, the loons, crooks, and worse says, if you're talking anti-gravity, you're a loon, a crook, or worse. It's got nothing to do with that. He knows. I got the video. You've probably seen the video. It was on the ship where he said, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. Next time, John Sillison, who's sitting beside him, his friend from University of UCLA, he's sitting beside him. He said, next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here are going to go into the next world and come back again. That's the portal story. That's the consciousness thing. The technology is not anti-gravity. It's this consciousness thing. It's this portal thing. And so I always watch it. And I remember I got frustrated at one point. And I don't, the odd time I'll have a contact with Ron, but really not. I always have this joke that I stay, a couple steps removed from my victim. I deal with people around him. So one of the people that was good friends with him, I said, I'm getting tired of this thing. I don't know this, it doesn't go anywhere. I know that the princess basically said, yeah, this is for real and stuff like that. And I said, I don't know if I'm going to, I said, what do you think? Should I hang around? And the guy said, yeah, I should probably hang around. So it's like 3 years later, and we're talking hockey. We're not even talking UFOs. He said, remember that question you asked me a couple of years ago? And I said, yeah, I remember. He said, it's real. I said, it's real. And this is the whole deal. This is what it's about. It's this idea that if we have any technology, it's got to do with time travel. And apparently Tim Taylor said the same thing. The Ryan Bledsoe said that he was told by Tim Taylor we had time travel technology. And I met Tim Taylor. I told this story with Chris Bledsoe. We were in a cabin in Pennsylvania, and Tim Taylor comes to me and he's got his cell phone. He says, what do you think of this? And he shows me this painting on his cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And it's these two guys flying through space. And he says, what do you think? And I go, I don't know, Tim. I have no idea. And he says, what about this? And he has these balls. It's a painting with all these balls going down this tunnel. And the balls get smaller and smaller as they go down the tunnel. And I go, I don't know. And he shows me another painting. And he shows me these things of outer space on the wall outside a building. And I go, Tim, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he shows me this 56 or 57 Chev up on top of this parkade. And he says, look at this. See the thing? Look in the back seat. Can you see this thing in the back seat? And I go, yeah. He says, it's a postcard. You know what it says? And I go, no, I don't know what it says. He says, it's some guy writing to his girlfriend or she's writing to him or whatever. He says, I wish I could travel through time and space to be with you. And I said, that's what it says. And then he says, so what do you think? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He says, you know where that is? I said, no, I don't know where it is, Tim. And he says, that's the Hughes Aircraft Building. I said, I still don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. He said, well, that's outside of LAX. That's where they used, and I can't remember whether he said, that's where the jump room used to be, or they had the jump room. I can't remember specifically whether he said it was there, but he said that's where the jump room was supposed to be or something like that. And I went, really? Can I see those again? He showed me the photographs again. And I go, wow, next time I go to LAX, I'm going there. It's 999 Sepulveda Avenue. Anybody wants to go. So there's the thing with the painting. And then these two guys, and they're in pajamas. And the one guy looks older than the other guy. And then he says, you know where that one is? And I go, no, where is it? He said, it's right outside the elevator. And the whole story is that Obama and all this whole thing, that they went up to the 5th floor and then they went to Mars and this jump room thing. So then when Tim Taylor tells Ryan Bledsoe that this time travel thing, and it wasn't until years later, I'm sitting there and I'm going, hey, why did Tim Taylor show me those photographs? Why was he at the building? If this is all garbage, you would say, that's total nonsense story. I never believed it. It's like nonsense. Why was he at the building? Why did Tim Taylor go to the building? He must have heard that there was some truth to it. And he went to the building and he found these photographs. So when I said, I'm going to go to the building, he said, well, watch out for the security guard. And sure enough, there's a security guard there. And I'm walking around taking photographs of all these paintings on the wall. And I actually phoned up, what's his name? Andrew Basiago. And I said, Andy, there's two buildings. It's been turned into an office building complex. I said, Andy, we're in the front building and the back building because there's elevators in both buildings. I'm trying to see, is that the building, the front building, the one with the paintings? And he said, I don't remember. As a young kid, I don't remember. It's the front building or the back building. But that's the whole thing. If they have the technology, it's this consciousness thing. It's this idea of things not being as physical as you think they are. And that's why Ron says, in fact, I'd have to get the quote, but there's actually one point where he's basically saying, if they're talking physical technology and stuff, it's loons, crooks, and worse. That they may believe it. It's not the hell put off and these people don't believe, wormholes, right, and all this kind of stuff. It's the fact that Ron, as he said at one point, he's asked about this thing about the keys. Have you heard the story about the keys? Where he's talking to Kit Green and he's talking to Robert Collins, who was the Condor, and they're talking about the briefing. And it was like they wouldn't brief. I can't remember who it was that wouldn't brief. Not like they briefed Hillary. And then Kit Green comes back, and Kit Green says, "Well, in fact, they did brief this person. I can't remember, Reed or maybe it was Reed. No, they wouldn't have briefed Reed." And he said, yeah, in fact, they did brief. And then Ron says, depends what you mean by briefing. He says, I get lots of requests from congressmen and senators, and because I've got the keys. And I tell them, I've got the keys. I can give you the keys and I can give it. But just remember, this is very dangerous stuff. You can get a lot of trouble. I give you the keys and you can go, or you can just let me hold the keys. And he said, they all let me hold the keys. I said, okay, I don't want to touch this. And I call him the guy, the keeper of the keys. He's the guy that knows what the technology is, whatever the level of technology. So I pay very close attention to him. He will talk to anybody. Anybody who wants to write him, he will talk to you. And if you get in a conversation with him, he will actually engage you. And it's almost like when I used to deal with James Oberg from NASA. I'd be arguing with him. And he would come back in 30 seconds. And then I would, spend 2 hours getting another answer. And that's where I leaned to skeptics who just got set worldviews. I'd go back and 30 seconds later, he'd be back with another reply. And I go, oh, and then 2 hours I'd spend, and then 30 seconds he'd be back. And then I went back to him. I said, James, are you working? Are you working there? Or are you just sitting on the internet? Like, how do you got time to do this? Because you could go any time of the day. Same with Ron. You can contact, he will contact you. And apparently at one point it was like part of his job is to deal with the loons. And he's talked to me. He's called me a loon and stuff like that. And that's I think the bottom line. I always try to figure out what it was. But what he said at the very beginning, the first thing he said to Dan Smith in 1991, when this whole thing started, he said, we have a phenomenology problem. And that's what you got to realize. It's not UFOs. It's phenomenology. And that's when the big game, I go through all the paranormal phenomena and I show you there's orbs here, there's orbs there, there's even the whole thing that people play this thing about the hitchhiker following people home. That is all over the place. And I have actually a photograph in the book. A friend of mine who was in Pierce, Utah, and he was in a graveyard, and he was yelling at this crypt, and he said, "Come on out! I want to take a picture of you. Come on out!" And this black thing comes out, and he actually photographs. I put the photograph in the book. This thing comes out, and he said it got twice as big as it was in the photograph. But he said I had no time to. I was making out. I was getting the camera equipment, and I'm getting the heck out of there. And he said the thing followed him for 5 years. This hitchhiker, this phenomena. After he did this, he went 3 houses. He said the thing followed him for 5 years. So that's what people don't realize. It's the same phenomena. You think as people want to parse it, they want to say there's UFOs and there's paranormal phenomena. And when you start to look, like now, you have the thing where everyone make a big deal. Like Elizondo had orbs in his house. Like, come on. So did Bigelow. So did George Knapp. I had my first orb experience in 1976 when we were calling them ground lights. They weren't even called orbs. And the people don't realize when Skinwalker Ranch got the first orb and they had this big show, oh, look at this orb. And it's like, come on, you think you invented orbs? Come on, we've been on orbs for years already. And people don't realize that. They think it's separate phenomena and it's all the same. And once you rip the veil and you have a UFO sighting, then suddenly people become telepathic and they start having other experiences. Or Semivan says, and he puts it like he wants to separate it. He said, well, I live in this house that has poltergeist in it and people walking around and all this. So he has all this other paranormal phenomena, but he doesn't think it's connected to the UFOs. I say, once you're in
it's 100% connected. Right.
It's all connected. Yeah. And that's
even with the Fae, like fairy phenomena, it's all the same. There's abductions.
Yeah.
Right. There's
Will
o' the wisps. Right. There's all
and they're taking on they go according to the culture that they're in. So it's like, do angels have wings or do angels not have wings? I mean, now we don't have the angel thing. So we have people who saw angels with wings or angels without wings, and you're part of the experience that you're seeing. So even they have the thing where people see Jesus in out-of-body experiences, and they actually did the study. So they had 17 people who saw Jesus in their out-of-body experience or their near-death experience. And every single person was different. So when people say, hey, they saw Jesus, I know they saw Jesus. And I always say, well, what did they see? Did you see the American Jesus with the blue eyes? Or did they see the Middle Eastern Jesus with the dark hair? And that's the whole thing. We got to realize that we're part of what we see in our dreams and out-of-body experiences. There's a motif. There's an overlying motif of events. Lucid dreaming, out-of-body experience, all this sort of stuff. But all of them are different. And I'm starting to believe that all aliens are going to be different. All technology is going to be different. Everything's going to be different. Uniqueness is not, there's people are looking for these patterns. So we're wasting our time. Like when Ron said this thing, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch those that the phenomena influences. Lights in the sky have no useful, meaningful information. And that's this whole thing. We think that there's green ones and red ones and fast ones. And we figure if we can figure out why the green ones are green, then we're going to figure out what the technology is. And it's like, no, they appear as where they want. So when I talk to an experiencer and they see a UFO, I say, so what was it doing? I'll say the same thing. It's like, it wasn't doing anything. It was just there. Do you think it saw you?
Yeah, I think it saw me. Do you think it knew you saw it? Yeah, I think so. And this is the whole thing. It's like, what's actually going on? Is there actually a craft there, or is this all? Or my friend, I have a big business friend here who had this experience where he left a movie, a UFO movie, 15 minutes before. He never had a UFO sight, and he's at a lake, and he walks out, and his wife says, "What are you doing? There's 15 minutes left in the movie. Why are you going outside of Skywatch?" And he goes out, and this UFO was by, and he's got his laser, and he hits it with the UFO, and then years later, he gets one of the top uh, uh, psychics who worked for the guy who ran the remote viewing program. He was known as the Raven. I can't. His name is escaping me. But anyway, she worked for him, and he asked her. He said, "Well, so where were they from? I saw that craft. Where were they from?" And he had another one in his backyard. Well, he saw it. It was a ball of flaming like fire, a ball of fire. And his wife, years later, when they're at a party, he told the story, and his wife says, "What are you talking about? That's not what it was." He said, "Yeah, that's what it was. What did you see?" "I saw this metallic craft." And he said, "You did?" And they saw two different things. So he asked the psychic, he said, "So where'd these aliens from?" And he said, "They weren't from anywhere. You sent them. You sent them to yourself to wake yourself up." And that's where you start to see this time and space thing, that you may be part of the thing, that you may be working with the aliens, you may be the aliens in another life or whatever. And people will talk, the experiencers will say, "That's my family. I have a relationship to them. I've seen them before." Or the whole idea, the Free Foundation book, the Beyond UFOs, which is the best UFO book there is, that has been totally ignored because it has this consciousness aspect to it, where you get people, 1/4 of people say that the being was with them in their last lifetime. I mean, if that's true, everything changes. It's not what you think it is. It's this other sort of thing. Or when Chris Bledsoe was being regressed, they said to him, "Chris, when was the first time you met these beings?" He said, "They have been with me since before I was born." And then the guy from Harvard said, "So, like in your last lifetime?" And he said, "Yes." And that's the whole thing. Everything changes. If these beings are connected to you and they were in your last lifetime, everything you believe about UFOs is going to end up being wrong. It's not aliens that accidentally came here. It's some very, very complex thing that involves multiple lives, about learning lessons and interactions and raising consciousness. And as I said, we make the assumption that we came into the world, and that we may have made an agreement. You and I had a meeting before we were born, and I said, "I'm going to come on your show. You're going to do this podcast," and this is all pre-planned, and we don't know it. We think it's random events, and in the end, there may be not any random events at all. I mean, this all may be very much planned, that we're running through this sort of scenario.
Yeah, it could all be choreographed. It could all be happening simultaneously, and it just
Yeah.
feels like it's happening linearly.
Yeah, and you get that in quantum physics, this idea that the time and space are creations of the conscious mind. If that's true, everything changes. People don't realize you got to take these things seriously. What if that's actually true? Then all the ideas about aliens coming through time and space through wormholes and stuff like that all just goes away. As if there's only here and now. It's what being said, in Great Britain. We've always been here. You're the visitor. And you hear more and more of this all the time, that the beings are actually here. So we got the idea they're hiding under the water and stuff like that. They don't have to hide under the water. They can disappear whenever they want. They don't have to have locations or the Mission Rama where they're under the mountain. And I even told Mission Rama, because it's crazy. Like, I mean, if you're an alien, well, why would you live under a mountain? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But they give you these scenarios, and they because they might make you understand. Or Barbara Streisand's stepson said that. He said that when they talked to him, they said, "When we come into your world, we come into your mind, and we see what's in your mind. And whatever's in your mind, that's what we use to teach you a lesson. We have no other choice. So if you're in fear, you're going to get a fear lesson. If you're in joy, you're going to get a joy lesson." And you see this reflective nature of things that you are creating what's going on around you. Think it's some independent thing, and I'm a victim, because we love to play the victim game. And if you take personal responsibility for it, then everything changes. That you say, this is here for a reason, and why is this happening, and why would I plan this? And then you can start making headway. But we're still into this the boys and their toys. We want who's ever got the most toys when they die wins. And we're kind of tired with the stuff we got now. And this seems exciting, and it's like a new movie, and let's find out what they're doing and what kind of technology they are and what we can build and all this kind of stuff. We're all going to make money. And I don't think that's what it's about at all.
So what do you think these guys are going to do? Like, because there's a big push right now in Congress. There's, you have James Fox, the program's coming out. The Soul Foundation's having another meeting.
Like, well, you're going to put pressure on them, but there's nothing you can do. If it's an executive program, if Semivan says it's an executive program, Congress has nothing to do with it. And they can block it, because that's the other thing people don't realize. They say, oh, they're breaking the law. They're not breaking the law. Semi Van will say that. Lukatsky will say that. No, nobody's breaking the law. These people are doing the best they can. These laws have been written. They're just very high level security. What people forget is that when you're talking top secret material, they say, oh, we get to see this top secret material. What you got to realize is, as I said, the congressmen have only got secret level. Where do they get their secret level security clearance? They get it from the executive office of the president of the United States. All security is not law. It's given by the executive or office of the president. That's why the president doesn't have a security clearance. That's why Trump was making these statements. I can declassify stuff in my mind. This is the whole idea. The president doesn't have a security clearance. When the president wants something, they say they will move mountains for the president to get whatever he wants. That all security clearances come from the president of the United States, and it started in World War II with the atomic bomb. That the first executive order came from the president of the United States to have confidential and secret. Then Eisenhower added top secret. Then they added the code words and stuff like that. It's all done out of the president of the United States. So people say that it's the law. It's not a law. It's run out of the president of the United States. And if you don't have the security clearance, you can't do anything. In fact, Semivan points out, if they give you the briefing, then you're stuck. And I made this sort of joke when Tim Burchett was saying, "Oh, it's terrible. You know, we were demanding a briefing." That's the fastest way to shut somebody up. So they say, "Okay, Tim, you want a briefing? Let's go into the skiff."
Yeah,
and you go into the skiff, and they say, "It's blue book. First, sign this paper. You're now under a security oath. You cannot talk about this anymore." All right, blue book, and there's no UFOs, and there's no extraterrestrials, whatever. And he comes out and he says, "That's garbage. We hear all that stuff. That's nonsense." Now he's quiet. He's been quieting down. The same as Danny Sheehan. Danny Sheehan said he would never sign a security oath. And then how did they shut him up? They said, "Oh, you're working for Lou Elizondo or whatever, and it's attorney-client privilege. You can't talk about it." And they told Danny Sheehan to shut up. Now Danny Sheehan ain't talking. And that's the thing. They can sort of shut you down. That even if you got it, you haven't got the security clearance. You need the security clearance in order to access the material. And the only people that have a security clearance are the Gang of Eight. And according to people like Lukatsky and people like this, these guys are briefed. And that was the giveaway by Reid writing this letter, and by Lukatsky saying that they were in they were in a congressional facility and they had a meeting about UFOs being inside the craft. And so Reid knew it. They are briefed, but there's only 8 guys that are briefed, and they're not going to talk about it because that's the whole deal. They're going to lose their security clearance, and
they go to prison. I mean, it's worse than that. They'll go to prison if they release too much, right?
Yeah, and or they can, it's everybody's playing. That's the thing, is everybody's playing the rule. And that's why I say to people, if this was so bad, why has a president not defected? Why has a president or a secretary of defense or something like that suddenly decided to go? Because they're all playing the rule. They all, for whatever the rules are behind there, they believe they're saving the world. They believe that this security is absolutely necessary, and they've signed the papers. And or people will say, like I'll say to you, have you ever had anybody that told you something you haven't released? And you say, yeah. Well, so then why don't you release that? And you say, well, because I made a promise with the guy. Well, maybe the government made a promise with people. Maybe they've got agreements with people. We have our agreements, like, that we've got whistleblowers that are coming to us and telling us stuff, and we're keeping it secret. But we're allowed to keep secrets, but they're not. And that's the whole thing. They think they're saving the world.
I've only been in 2 secret briefings, but I don't want to go to prison, so I'm not. I mean, they're not that interesting, but
that's the thing.
Reveal the context of that briefing.
People will basically follow the law, and that's what I found when I started reading these things in the libraries. When I would read these oral histories of people that I knew, like Dick Cheney and people like that, and I go, holy cow, it's a completely different guy when you hear him behind the scenes and why he made that decision and stuff like that. And you realize these people all are following the law. They're going along, and the law sets it. So what you have to do if you want to change it is you've got to change the law. You've got, and so I would say to people like Burchett and Nancy Mace and Anna Luna, if you want, they're saying, oh, the government this, the government, get your head in order. Who writes the laws? It's written by Congress. Get off your fat ass and write a bill and pass it. And then send it to the Senate and pass it and say, this is the law of the land, and the president will veto it. And then you override the veto, and then the president has to uphold the law, and the thing will change. But they'll say, well, no, we can't get it passed. Whose problem is that? You can't blame the president because you can't get a bill passed. That's the whole thing. They forget You're the Illuminati. You're the guy that's behind the cover up. You're the guy that writes the laws. These are written into laws. You've got to change the law. The same as I have disagreement that Supreme Court justices can take people who are coming in front of the court and receive free motorhomes and trips around the world. It's so what? I don't like it. Until they change the law, the Supreme Court says, get lost. This is the law, and you have to live with the law as it is. If you don't like it, change the law. The people that change the law are not the president, does not write the law. The law is created by Congress. If the Congress doesn't like the situation, write the law and get it passed and change the law. They're the ones that are blockading this whole thing, not the president. The president is there to uphold the law. The president, all law is written by Congress. And if they don't like the law, if they think it's illegal, then write another law to find a bathroom. I mean, they can't do anything. They can't pass any bills. That's the big problem. Is it's a deadlocked Congress, and you can get one guy or two guys that can block the Schumer amendment. You get these Mike guys, and they get Mike Johnson on board, and then Mike Johnson says it's a party vote, which means if you vote against blocking this thing, then you're out of the party. And so everybody goes and they play the party politics and they block it. So you can, like, people are saying, oh, we got this new amendment coming through, and it's like, come on, what do you think, these guys have suddenly come to Jesus or something? They're suddenly going to change their mind? No, they're going to vote the same way they voted before. They're the same guys that blocked it are going to block it before. They are the ones that are writing the law, and if they don't like it, Congress can write a new law. And quit complaining and whining like a little kid going through the checkout that doesn't get the chocolate bar and screaming at his mother he wants a chocolate bar going through the checkout. That's what it is. It's just this whining and finger pointing. And in fact, the Congress is the ones that write the laws. They are the ones that created this situation that we're in right now. Everything has been adopted. It's been going along, and now they suddenly don't like the law, and they think that they can pressure the executive branch to do this. With the executive branch, as they did when the Schumer amendment came out, Biden actually said, we realize our obligation to brief the Congress, but there's national security implications. And that comes back to this PED thing, that there's this exemption thing that the president can, and this is what it's under. And that's when Semivan says, and everybody ignores him. Semivan said it was a PED, and it's absolutely legal, and it's always been legal, and that's how it works. And you got to get away from the idea that there's some sort of Illuminati that's writing rules and whatever. It's been written that way. And once you figure out how it works, you can change it. But whether you're going to be able to stop a PED, they said none has ever been, they don't even know what they're about. I think there's 19 of them, and none has ever been declassified, and it has absolute authority that they don't even have to brief Congress on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll just be a lot of back and forth, but I think those of us who really want to know, we're just going to have to figure it out ourselves.
Well, you got to get your congressman to pass a law. That's what I say to Burchett. You don't like it?
I still think. I mean, I think you figured out most of it on your own. I think most people.
Well, that's the ultimate disclosure. The ultimate disclosure is consciousness. We're going to figure it out in the consciousness realm. We already way ahead of them. That they're all going down dark alleys. They're not going to figure out this thing. That's what they're doing. I mean, we've done this for 80 years. I mean, the old expression, how many times you got to do it before you realize you're crazy? You do the same thing over and assume that something's going to change. No, you're doing the same thing as you did before. So the consciousness thing, the idea that this is this complex consciousness thing, that's the true disclosure. And that's what's coming now. That's why this telepathy thing is so important, where you got kids who are 100% telepathic. That is like a minefield in terms of understanding how the reality actually works. Because in the end, the UFO thing is just a small segment of reality. The key is to figure out, how does reality work? How is the world actually put together? That's the bottom line. The UFO thing is just a sideshow. It's like a Jesus circus. I call it the Jesus circus thing. UFOs doing a bunch of Jesus acts, and people are going, wow, what's going on here? And then eventually they're going to deliver the message. But we're just chasing our tails and all these weird things. And you can have, news stories and another video. It's going to be the same videos. They're not getting anywhere. They haven't gotten anywhere for 80 years. The true disclosure is going to be to understand this consciousness aspect, that it's not this physical thing you think it is, and understand how the world works. And we've gotten there with this telepathy thing. I was so amazed by that. I knew she was right with this right brain, left brain thing. And what these kids can do is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it just makes remote viewing look like it's totally. And I actually went to Kit Green. I said, Kit, Listen to this tape. There's 6 episodes. I sent them number 3, and these kids talk about what's called the hill. They go on the hill. These kids are nonverbal autistics, so they're at home. They've never left home. They're being, they can't do anything. They're at home, and these kids start talking about the hill. They go to the hill. They got one kid in Georgia. They got one kid in Utah. They got one kid in New Jersey, and they start talking about the hills. That these kids are meeting on what's called the hill, telepathically, and they all are talking. And they asked the one kid, "How many kids are on the hill today? How many people are on the hill?" And he said, 1,789 people are on the hill today. And they telepathic. So I went to Kit because I knew Kit had always tried to do experiments. He wanted to put Uri Geller into an MRI machine, and he was going to put K. Randall May in the other MRI machine. And what he wanted to see is telepathy non-local. Is there going to be a time lapse between the signals as they send a telepathic signal? So I said, Kit, I realize you've wanted to do long distance telepathy. Listen to this show. I think you might be interested. And he wrote me back, and guess what he said? He said, I'm very interested and I'm watching closely. So Kit Green's watching this very closely, and he realizes this whole idea that this is like the breakthrough thing where they've got this thing where these kids are completely 100% telepathic, and that kind of stuff starts to get the idea of what's really going on. How does the world work? What's in the mind? How can these kids do these mathematical formulas in their mind? How can you pull material out of the field and stuff like that? And it bypasses the whole UFO thing. The UFO thing is meaningless after that. It's this whole idea of this idea of the power of the mind. And the aliens, you can see this. They're very right-brained. They don't have fear. They don't have the left brain thing. They don't have names. They don't have any physical stuff. They're very right-brained, and they're talking in symbols, and that's all right-brained. And you start to see the connections to all this stuff. But it's the bottom line is what we're trying to figure out is, how does reality actually work? Why are we here? How did we get here? Why are we here? Where are we going? And the idea that we probably made an agreement to come here. What are we supposed to be doing when we're here? And are we doing it? And that's this whole thing. We're getting sidetracked by the circus, the Jesus circus show of looking at this stuff because it's all interesting. Look at this latest sighting and all this sort of stuff. And it's not getting us there. We've done this over and over and over and again. And the bottom line is, how does reality actually work? And there's this people at the top, like Jim Semivan knows, Lakatsky knows. Lakatsky said, we've confirmed that there is, it's psychic and physical is how they move the ship around. And so they know this. There's people at the top who know this connection to this, to the consciousness thing. And the rest of it all, I don't think is really all that important. It's this, they've figured this sort of thing out, but they can't figure it out because it's so far beyond them. But I think these kids are an opening in terms of being able to duplicate this. And so hopefully Kit reaches out and does some experiments and they bring this forward. The problem with that is that Kit doesn't talk. So Kit has all this stuff. He's on the Tiger Committee, and they're working on technologies 50 years in the future. But that's the thing.
What's the Tiger Committee? What is that?
Well, he sits on what's called the Tiger Committee. So Ron will always, in these meetings or these chatterback open minds forums where they used to talk. And they would talk about this Tiger Committee, which is like a committee that looks at technology 50 years in the future. And Kit, I think, is running this Tiger Committee. It's a defense intelligence committee. And what they're doing is they're trying to anticipate future technology. Like, what do the Russians have? The same thing they did with the OSAP program. Write these papers on 50 years down the road. So that was the idea. So they're looking at this advanced technology. And the thing is that when you get this kind of technology, this one won't, but most of the technology, if they get it, it just slides into this black box. And they may know down the road some of the aspects of the consciousness thing, but they're never going to release it because they're trying to militarize it. They're trying to turn weapons out of it. And that's where Kit is in this thing where if you're working for the Defense Department, then you're working for the Defense Department. You're doing that whole thing of weapons. And so hopefully we get some stuff out of it because Kit knows he knows the consciousness connection. I mean, if you've heard the tape, I don't know if you've heard the tape, the leaked tape that I got on him, where he's talking to K. Randall May. And K. Randall May's talking about there's a portal off the coast of California, and he's going, hang on, let me write that down. It's like, serious, it's gonna be, hang on, I'll write that down. And then he said, I don't know anything about interdimensional factories or whatever it was. He says, but I know that she's 95 to 100% accurate medical. And he's and all this kind of stuff, and she's telling them this stuff about the beings and who they're dealing with and stuff like that. And he's talking about it. I'll send you the tape. He's treating her like she's like, it's everyday thing. And what they've done is they realize she's the best in medical intuitive in the United States, and they're tapping her. They're asking the same thing I do this to these channelers. When I get a real good channeler, I say, hey, what about this? So I ask about the hill. I said to the people, I said to the last one, I said, what about the hill? Ask them about the hill. Ask them about people interacting. And they basically confirmed she didn't bring up the hill, but they brought up the thing that, yeah, all the minds can connect and they can talk in the background and gather together and stuff like that.
What was this researcher's name who's working with the autistic children again?
Diane Hennessy Powell.
Diane Hennessy Powell. Okay.
Yeah, and she's been working on this for years. She had Haley was her famous one, and what you do is you get sort of intimidated. So she had this Haley, hit 161 targets numbers, and she got 7 wrong, and so Diane said, "Oh, you got 7 wrong," and she went, got 161 in a row right. So she puts this tape out. I've got the tape. I can send you the tape. She's got this tape of Haley, and she's nonverbal. She's touching this keypad, and there's this divider, and her caregiver is on the other side looking at this number, and then she puts the keypad, the thing out, and she touches the number, she pulls it back, and they have this board in between them, and Haley is just picking off all these numbers. And so then she put the tape out, and she thought, and I said, if it was a fair world, Diane Hennessy Powell would win a Nobel Prize, but it's not a fair world. So she put this thing out. She thought, oh, she solved this thing. And then some skeptic says, oh, there may have been a tape recorder behind Haley that was giving her the numbers. So then, of course, Diane makes the mistake of rerunning the experiment. She says, well, I'll rerun the experiment to prove that that's not happening. And you go this thing where it doesn't matter what you say to the skeptics, they're just going to come up with another explanation. And you're going to do the experiment again and experiment again. And so she tried to run the experiment again, but she couldn't raise the money. But then she found these other kids. And then this Thai, and it's one of the top 100 podcasts. It's the first time consciousness seems to have broken through. It's one of the top 100 upcoming podcasts or something like that. And so it's Ty Dixon is the girl. And it's a fascinating series. It's called The Telepathy Tapes. There's 6 episodes. Maybe the 7th is out now. It's absolutely fascinating. When she's going from kid to kid, and they got this Mexican kid, and they're talking in other languages. So the woman goes to this kid's nonverbal autistic in Mexico. And Ty Dickens writes her in Spanish, and the girl answers back in English. Same as Haley, her caregiver said to her, Haley, are you reading my mind? And then she says, how do you say I love you in German? And then Haley goes, ich liebe dich.
Ich liebe. Right.
Yeah. And she went, she is reading my mind. And that's when they got a hold of Diane Hennessy Powell, because she's a neuropsychologist, and she started this whole thing. And then you go into the whole thing of the paranormal. And so when I'm interviewing Diane in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to ask her about the bike thing. She has an incident where she has a bike accident, where she has this very serious head injury, and she has this awakening. And she's never told the story, but you start to see that once you get the rip, you can say to people, like people say, oh, I don't think I was abducted. I just got dreams of abduction. And then I say, so anything else weird happened in your life? They go, oh yeah. And it's the ghosts that start from their little kids and all this stuff. And that's what you see is this pattern. And people are parsing it. They think it's one thing. And when you start asking, you realize it's all this thing, it's all connected, but it's all this ooly consciousness stuff that is there. And we're sort of ignoring that in favor of the stuff, the clickbait stuff, the conspiracy stuff, the videos, all that kind of stuff, but it hasn't gotten us anywhere in 70 years. And that's the problem we have in the UFO community is everybody thinks that the secret is the next video. That's what's going to break it. Or somebody's going to break it. So every time someone brings out a new video, everybody jumps on it, everybody clicks, and it's all over the place. And then someone says, oh, it's a hoax, and they prove it's a hoax. And then it goes, and they sit there and wait for the next one. And it's so easy to take people for a ride because everybody thinks that the answer is the next video. And that's where we're getting it. The answer is already there. There's these stories and these people out there, and you can actually run it, but these people are being ignored. And everybody in the consciousness field knows that we're totally ignored, that nobody wants to talk about consciousness. In fact, the one guy told me, a pretty major guy, he said, if this turns out to be the spiritual stuff that you say, I'm going to kill myself. I go, okay. And that's what I say. The end is going to, people are going to say, when they disclose this thing, the Christian people are all going to be jumping off bridges. No, I say the secular scientists are the ones that are going to be fighting over the cyanide pills. They're going to realize I paid $50,000 a year at MIT, and all this crap was wrong. That this is wrong, that's wrong. Even now, you even have this thing with it changes so often. You just sort of think these guys are on top of it. They got all figured out. They went from 100 billion galaxies. And then one day they said, oh, we made a mistake. It's 2 trillion. And they're up by 20 times. And it's like, oh, okay. And now we got the Webb telescope, and they realize these galaxies at the beginning of the galaxy are all very advanced. And now they've suddenly said, oh, it's not 13.8 billion years. It's not 27 billion years. And they just changed the numbers, and we don't realize. Wilbur Smith said that back in the 1950s. He said science is basically they work, and then something happens and they put a Band-Aid on it, and then something else breaks and they put another Band-Aid. And it's this thing where they got all these Band-Aids on it, and the basic premise is wrong. It's not a physical random universe. It's a consciousness universe where it's all one thing. It's all vibrating. And the Maya idea, when the vibration starts, the illusion starts. It's all illusion at various vibrating frequencies. And these beings are at a higher, people will tell you when they're on the grays, you can't be around the grays for very long because they vibrate so heavily. It's vibration. They can pop into their level. They can come into our level, lower their vibration. And that's the thing we got to start to understand is how does the universe actually work? And the consciousness thing, I maintain, will be the answer.
All right, Grant, we have a minute left. Any final words?
Let me look at my list here. No, I think that's basically it. Look at the telepathy tapes. My 2 books, the Big Game, will have a lot of paranormal stories you've never heard before coming out. And then I'm going to do my silence book on the that'll be pretty controversial, I think. The whole defense of, and I think I can defend what these people are doing, because I've met these people. When you meet these high level people, you realize they're just ordinary people. You interview Semi-Van and you go, hey, he's an okay guy. Like, he's not trying to destroy the world. And that's what you realize. It's everybody's playing the game. Everybody thinks they're saving the world. And it's just our assumptions wrong. We've got things that we assume are right that are actually wrong. And that's where we go down side paths. And then we don't want to move off our path. We want to, as Einstein said, you spend from 0 to 25 years inventing stuff, and then for the rest of your life defending it.
All right, Grant, as always, an absolute pleasure. And thank you for everyone for listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. See you again next week. Thank you.